This is our community's house. We are all here to serve it. My name is Mike Little, Mayor of the District North Vancouver, and the pleasure falls to me to welcome you all here to this public hearing for Tuesday, February 24th at 7 o'clock. A public hearing is a quasi-judicial setting handed down to us by provincial legislation, and so we have to follow the regulations laid out to us fairly tightly. And so for that, I do have a bit of a script that I'm going to read as we get going today. And here we go. The public hearing is being convened pursuant to Section 464 of the Local Government Act and is being held in a hybrid meeting format, meaning there is a combination of in-person and electronic participation by some or all members of council or by staff and the public. The hearing is being streamed live over the internet and recorded in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Public participation in this hearing is being accommodated by speakers having signed up in advance, as stated in the notice of public hearing, as well as observers being provided the Zoom meeting information on the DNV website and in the notice of public hearing. Written submissions will be received by the corporate officer on behalf of and shared with council at any time up to the time the hearing is closed. These may be submitted to input@dnv.org. Therefore, in this manner, all persons will be afforded a reasonable opportunity to be heard and to present written submissions. The chair has established the following rules for this hearing. 1. Following the staff and applicant presentations, we will go through the established speakers list. At the end of the speakers list, the chair may call for any other speakers not on the speakers list. Speakers will have 5 minutes. Number 2, speakers will have 5 minutes to address council for a first time and are asked to begin their remarks to council by stating their name. 3, after everyone who wishes to speak has spoken once, speakers will then be allowed one additional 5-minute opportunity. 4, any additional presentations will only be allowed at the discretion of the chair. Speakers are reminded to not repeat information from their previous presentations and to ensure all comments remain focused on the bylaw under consideration this evening. 5, if a written submission has been provided, there is no need to read it as it will have already been seen by the council. Speakers may summarize or briefly reiterate the highlights of the submission. 6, all members of the audience are asked to be respectful of one another as diverse opinions are expressed. Council wishes to hear from everyone's views in an open and impartial forum. Some important notes about public hearings. Council is here. Sorry, I have to make sure I'm online there. Okay. Council is here to listen to the public, not to debate the merits of the bylaw. Council may ask clarifying questions. The corporate officer has a binder containing documents and submissions related to the bylaw which council has received and which you are welcome to review. This is available on the table next to the door and online at dnv.org/agenda. Everyone at the hearing will be provided an opportunity to speak. If necessary, we will continue on a second night. At the conclusion of the public input, council may request further information from staff which may or may not require an extension of the hearing, or council may close the hearing, after which council should not receive further new information from the public. Just before I go to the corporate officer, something I'm just going to restate, it's in there, but I'm going to restate it, is the public hearing is an opportunity for council to hear from the public. Some people have viewed it as an opportunity for question and answer. Unfortunately, it's not. The way it's laid in legislation, it's an opportunity for us to hear from the public. The best opportunities for question and answer happen ahead of the public hearing. Having said that, even once we close the hearing, you are welcome to submit your questions to staff, and we'll do our best to get you responses with the information we have available. But once it's closed, council will not be able to consider additional new information at that time. So I just wanted to restate that we've had a number of public hearings recently where people came out and had a whole series of questions to ask. Unfortunately, you're going to get the same unsatisfying response from me that the purpose of the hearing is to hear people's comments. It's not for question and answer. I did just want to also state that, as was said at the beginning, the meeting is being held in a hybrid format. And so you have 6 members of council here who are present. Councillor Murray is joining us virtually today because she has a cold. Therefore, in this way, all 7 members of our council are participating in this evening's public hearing. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to the corporate officer to read the bylaw into the record.
Thank you. Through the chair, District of North Vancouver rezoning bylaw 1462, bylaw 8778, Bylaw 8778 proposes to amend the district zoning bylaw in general terms by adding an exception to the prohibition of the manufacture of hazardous substances in all zones for the subject site to permit the manufacturing, processing, liquefaction, handling, storage, loading, and shipping of chlorine on the lands located at 100 Amherst Avenue.
Thank you very much. At this time, we're going to go to our staff for a presentation of up to 15 minutes. Welcome, Yenze.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Your Worship. Members of Council and members of the public. My name is Yan Zhang, Manager of Development Planning with the District of North Vancouver. Would I be able to get this online? Okay, thank you. Tonight's public hearing is for rezoning bylaw 8778, a text amendment to permit the manufacturing, processing, liquefaction, handling, storage, loading, and shipping of chlorine at the Chemtrade facility. My opening presentation is approximately 15 minutes long with 12 slides, and I will provide responses to some key questions asked by Mayor and Council during the first reading of the bylaw. And my presentation will be followed by the presentation by the applicant team. So, thank you. The site at 100 Amherst Avenue is located within Maplewood Heavy Industrial Area. It spans two jurisdictions, privately owned district administered lands shown in blue on this slide, and then Port of Vancouver lands, which is leased land shown in orange. Historically, part of the chlorine liquefaction process occurred on the leased port lands. The port has advised that the production activities must be removed from its jurisdiction by 2030. As a result, Chemtrade must relocate and consolidate chlorine liquefaction entirely onto their own land that is under the district jurisdiction. Although the site is designated and zoned for heavy industrial use, relocating and capital improvement related to the manufacturing of chlorine, classified as a hazardous substance, requires a site-specific text amendment to the zoning bylaw. Using the OCP map, the land use map, where the purple indicates industrial designation, 100 Amherst Avenue is outlined in black. The OCP supports protecting employment lands, maintaining industrial uses, supporting industrial jobs, and preventing encroachment by incompatible uses. From a land use policy perspective, the proposal is consistent with the OCP objectives for industrial employment lands. The rezoning would enable the applicant to do capital improvements to the existing chlor-alkali facility. And here is, on this slide, is an overview of that improvement. This perspective is from Burrard Inlet, from the water with the port land in the foreground, and then the applicant-owned district-administered lands in the background. The applicant will go over their proposal in more detail in their presentation. And here I just want to highlight that there will be a new condenser tower and an enclosed rail loading facility on the district portion of the land shown in the dark brown. So my cursor here showing the dark brown here. And then while on the Portland's portion, with the active chlorine production facilities removed, what will remain would be storage, rail yard, and other supported functions. Key to the proposal is that it does not increase the chlorine production capacity at the facility. The focus of the capital investment is modernization and risk reduction. The proposed text amendment is to the general regulations of the zoning bylaw, section 403A, which prohibits production of hazardous substance. This is for a site-specific exemption to that prohibition, and they only apply to this site. So this text amendment before you tonight limits that exemption to allow chlorine at this location. Baker Risk, an internationally recognized risk management and engineering consulting firm, prepared the facility siting study and quantitative risk assessment, QRA, quantitative risk assessment for the Chemtrade site. That's in short, that's QRA. The study evaluates off-site public risk associated with the chlorine hazards and assess the redesigned facility configuration. The proposed upgrades remove bulk liquid chlorine storage and introduce enclosed scrubbed rail car loading systems. And this is stated by the professional as significantly reducing potential release scenarios. The assessment uses quantitative risk modeling to evaluate individual and societal risk and compares the risk results against Canadian Land Use Safety Guidelines that's established by the Major Industrial Accident Council of Canada, or MIAC. Given the significance of this application, the district retained Risk Tech Solutions Canada Limited to conduct an independent third-party peer review of the Baker Risk QRA. Risk Tech is an established safety and risk management firm based in Calgary, Alberta, specializing in high hazard industries such as chemical processing, LNG, hydrogen, and energy facilities. Their mandate for this review was comprehensive. They reviewed the QRA methodology, verify the compliance with the Canadian risk tolerance criteria under MIAC, assess the proposed mitigation measures, and evaluated the building siting and potential off-site risk impacts. The review was led by senior professionals with experience in quantitative risk assessment and probabilistic risk modeling. Risk Tech confirmed that, as shown on this one, their key finding that the QRA as proposed by Baker Risk meets the Canadian risk tolerance standards. Off-site individual and societal risk remain below acceptable thresholds. The 1 in 10,000 per year control zone remain within the property boundary. This means representing a reduction in risk. The modeling techniques used are technically sound. They're conservative and consistent with industry best practice. Importantly, they concluded that the proposed upgrades are expected to reduce both likelihood of an event and its potential consequences. Their overall conclusion was that the QRA is suitable to support the district consideration of this rezoning application. So the last part of my presentation, I want to go over some of the questions at first reading of the rezoning bylaw. There are some questions raised by Mayor and Council, and I'd like to group those key questions and provide some responses. My detailed responses are included in the staff response document in the public hearing binder. The first group of questions related to what will happen next, how safety is eventually secured on site. Rezoning, if adopted, would not be the final step in the safety review process. At the permitting stage, the applicant would be required to submit a detailed validation quantitative risk assessment prior to the issuing of a building permit. This assessment must be prepared by the same independent qualified professional who prepared the facility siting study and the QRA, and it must include a professional certification under seal. Another round of peer review can also be required by the district. And before occupancy is issued, a verification report would also be required to confirm that the project has been constructed in accordance with the approved risk assessment and associated safety commitments. And finally, prior to final rezoning adoption by council, registration of legal charges, this is section 219 covenant, will be required. As stated in the staff report, they must be in form and content acceptable to the municipal solicitor to, among other things, secure appropriate commitments relating to the production, storage, and distribution of chlorine, including, without limitation, commitments relating to the location on the site of such activities, maximum production and storage volumes, and compliance with all safety measures in the required FSS and QRA reports. These instruments are legally binding and run with the land. Objectives of this would be the safety commitment to secure the safety commitment of the applicant that they are strictly adhered to and beyond the initial rezoning stage throughout the ongoing operation. There's a question about the agreement between the applicant and the port. The property spans two jurisdictions, as stated earlier, lands within the district and lands owned by the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. The district zoning authority applies only to the fee simple lands within municipal jurisdiction. The port lands are federally regulated and governed separately under the port. The current port lease expires on June 30th, 2030. There is a non-binding letter of intent between the applicant and the port to extend the lease to December 31st, 2044. However, the port has confirmed that processing and manufacturing activities are not permitted on lands under their authority. As a condition of the lease renewal, chlorine manufacturing must be removed from the port lands. The applicant proposal to locate and consolidate chlorine liquefaction equipment onto district-administered lands reflects this requirement. The port has indicated it is very supportive of the continued operation and trade-related use on the site, consistent with their mandate, provided that the condition regarding the removal of the manufacturing use is met. It is important to clarify that council's decision relates only to land use within district jurisdiction. Continue the operation of the facility would depend on both district approvals and port lease arrangements, which are outside district authority. In summary, the proposed relocation responds to the port lease condition, and then the rezoning decision applies only to the district administered lands. Second to last question is related to how prepared emergency responders as well as community members are in response to a probable event. Community safety in the Maplewood area has been addressed through both land use planning and emergency preparedness frameworks. First, with respect to planning, the gold standard is the QRA assessment of this risky businesses. Multiple qualitative risk assessments have been completed and peer reviewed. Risk contours were established using the Major Industry Accidents Council of Canada, or MIAC, risk acceptability criteria, which is considered Canada's best practice for risk-based land use planning. These contours define acceptable land uses and densities based on levels of industrial risk. Sensitive uses such as schools and hospitals are located beyond the more conservative contour, further away from the site in question. The Maplewood implementation plan incorporates these contours and includes policies requiring development to align with MIAC guideline. And secondly, within the defined contour area, additional building level measures are recommended. And this includes the ones listed on this slide here, the HVAC system, et cetera. And third, with respect to emergency response, we're happy to answer any questions later on. With regards to emergency response, there is a long-established collaborative response approach amongst the various partners, including fire departments in both the city and the district jurisdiction, NACIM, and facility operators. In the event of a release with potential offsite impact, CamTrade, in this case, activates a facility siren, which automatically triggers a 911 call and public messaging through the Rapid Notify system. Fire and rescue services respond immediately and coordinate directly with the facility. North Shore Emergency Management, NACIM, has access to Rapid Notify to distribute alerts by text, phone, and email to defined geographic areas. The systems is tested monthly, and emergency notification procedures are reviewed regularly. And finally, emergency planning includes education on shelter-in-place procedures, encouragement for residents and businesses to register for notification systems. Development covenants are registered on title with some of the developments in the Maplewood area to make residents aware of the procedure. Ongoing review through the Community Advisory Panel, CAP. In summary, Community safety is addressed through risk-based land use planning, peer-reviewed technical analysis, building-level design mitigation, coordinated emergency response protocols, and ongoing monitoring and community engagement. This is my last slide. There was a question about the safety of the rail transportation. Rail transportation in Canada is regulated by the federal government, Transport Canada. It oversees rail operations under the Rail Safety Act. And then the transportation of dangerous goods, including chlorine, is regulated under the Transportation of Dangerous Goods regulations. Rail cars used to transport chlorine are specialized pressure tank cars designed to meet stringent federal safety standards. And these rail cars are subject to regular inspection, maintenance, and certification requirements. Operational matters such as routing, speed, crew requirements, and rail corridor safeties are regulated federally and managed by the rail operators. It is important to clarify that the district authority relates to land use and development within municipal jurisdictions. Rail operations beyond the site boundary fall under federal oversight and an outside municipal authority. That said, emergency response coordination occurs at municipal levels. Local fire and safety, fire and rescue services coordinate with rail operators and federal authorities in the event of an incident with established emergency response protocol in place. So in summary, rail safety beyond the site is federally regulated. Equipment and operations must meet national standards, and the district rules is limited to land use approvals within its jurisdiction. Mayor and Council, based on the technical review that staff relied upon from qualified professionals, including the independent third-party peer review confirming compliance with the Canadian risk tolerance standards, staff recommend that Council approve the text amendment before you tonight to permit the manufacturing, processing, liquefaction, handling, storage, loading, and shipping of chlorine on the lands located at 100 Amherst Avenue. This concludes my presentation, and before I hand over to the Camtrick team, what's on the slide here, just wanted to introduce who's available tonight. So alongside me, we have Dan Milburn, GM Planning, Properties and Permits, Afruz Fala, Planning Assistant, and we have Risk Consultant with us as well. And then from the applicant side, we have Ellen Robinson, Dale Bossons, Amy Johnson, as well as Baker Risk Consultant Alexander Ferguson, who I believe these four individuals will make their presentation along with other subject matter expert. We also have Jennifer Law from the Port Authority with us tonight. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to invite the applicant team up to the desk.
That's it, right? This one. That's it. No.
Councillor Murray, just want to check in. I see your virtual hand is raised, but we'll get to council clarifying questions after the first round of public. Is it about the process?
Just about if there's anybody from North Shore Emergency Management or the fire department in regards to emergency response. I didn't see anybody on that list from sort of the emergency response part of this.
We'll double check. At this point, I don't see a name that reflects those, but do we have Yan Zhang, North Shore Emergency Management or Fire? Oh, nope. Okay. We just have their recommendations. Okay. At this point, welcome. If you could introduce yourself and your team, we'd appreciate that. And you'll have 15 minutes to make the applicant presentation at that point.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and the council here as well. We appreciate the opportunity. My name is Alan Robinson. I'm the commercial officer for Chemtrade, and with me today is going to be Dale Bossons, our VP of Manufacturing. And as you heard, Alex from Baker Risk is on the phone, and we'll address some of the QRA curve questions as well. So first, I just want to do a quick overview of the site that is in question here tonight with the North Vancouver site. So a couple of key things. And I won't touch on all these bullet points, but as we've talked before, the criticalness of chlorine to making sure drinking water is safe around Canada as well as Western US. We do represent 70% of the Western Canadian drinking water and 40% of all liquid chlorine here available in Canada itself. I won't go through all the economic benefits. I know questions were asked where we employ roughly almost 120 people, and you can see the dollar amounts in terms of taxes and what we inject into the local community, as well as what we inject into the local or the economy of all of Canada as well. We're going to go into much more detail here around the proposal and the safety upgrades. Just wanted to remind everybody, we've been operating here for over 65 years, extremely safe. No major issues here. We've also done significant investments over the last, we'll call it over a decade, almost $500 million. It's a very modern and safe facility. We'll talk about the new upgrades and the design capabilities that we're putting in place. And I'll just remind there's multiple other products. We make 4 products in total out of this particular site and are supplying into several industries from energy as well as drinking water and pulp and paper and others, et cetera.
Whether we were called Hooker Chemical, Canoxy, Nexen, Connexus, or Chemtrade, this site has been part of the community since 1957. So it'll be our 69th year operating at 100 Amherst Avenue. And with operating a facility like this comes a lot of responsibility, and Chemtrade recognizes this responsibility. We recognize it to our neighbors, to our employees, to the community, and we take that responsibility very seriously. This is why over the last 30 years, we've been focusing on reducing the risk profile of the site to the community. We've been implementing process upgrades, improved safety and control systems, and reducing the liquid chlorine storage within our process by up to 94% since we were operating the plant back around 2000. That is a significant reduction in liquid chlorine. And as I think we've specified in some of our previous information we've submitted, liquid chlorine is the primary risk driver here that we're talking about. Let's jump to the next slide. We also recognize, though, that it's not just the risk of the site that people are concerned about. It's also what happens after that chlorine leaves the facility. Transporting dangerous goods by rail is the safest way to move them. And it's highly regulated, as you heard earlier, by the federal government to ensure that it's done safely with the intent to minimize risk. The rail cars used to transport chlorine are highly specialized, and they're designed to withstand impact, rollover, with no loss of material. We actually have some examples here that we'll pass along later of the actual wall thickness of these chlorine cars. These chlorine cars are built with the intention to withstand significant impacts. In fact, the new generation of rail cars that we use that Chemtrade uses have never been involved in a release of material due to a rail incident, and they're built to new standards that were developed based on learnings from previous incidents. So these are extremely robust rail cars. They undergo thorough inspections, training, maintenance programs. All of this exists to manage our rail fleet and to minimize the risk. Simply stated, moving chlorine by rail, it is the safest option in terms of transporting dangerous goods. The safety improvement projects that we're talking about and that initially triggered this whole rezoning activity involves the construction of a new chlorine railcar loading facility that will completely enclose all the loading activities and replace all the current piping and equipment that is associated with liquid chlorine. So we're going to have a completely new, modernized handling facility. All liquid chlorine handling will be done indoors in an enclosed building that runs under negative pressure with a scrubbing system attached to the building. So even in the unlikely event that there is a release during the loading process, it will all be captured and scrubbed. This is going to drastically reduce the risk of the process, and it will ensure that even during upset operating conditions, everything will be completely contained and we will not be posing a risk to our neighbors. Next slide. The timeline for implementing these improvements is spread out over the next 4 years. This is a very significant engineering and construction exercise. The major work will be taking place during the 2 major turnarounds. The first will be in 2028 with final commissioning in 2030. The sooner we can be granted approval for the rezoning, the sooner we can move ahead with the detailed engineering design and start the lengthy process of procurement and construction of the new process. This is a major project that will also inject millions of dollars into the local economy in addition to making the community safer.
Over the last 2 years, we've been engaging with the community through multiple different media options, whether it's been website, community newsletters. We've had hundreds of local residents out to tour the site, to see us on Community Day, and we've probably touched millions of Canadians during the rail strike with all of the media coverage around the shortness of chlorine and rail not moving. So this has been a significant outreach throughout the community, which we believe we've done a phenomenal job making sure the local community understands the importance and the safety of the site, as well as the rest of Canada. Why are we applying for rezone and what are some of the benefits? Just recapping what we've stated here. Again, significant player in terms of safety of drinking water for Canada. Also, as you look at the geopolitical shifts that are taking place now more than ever, it's important to make sure we secure domestic production. You know, as we look at continued investment in the safety upgrades, we'll hear more about that and the safety aspect with the QRA curves, and then the continued job employment injection into the community in terms of the economy, et cetera, is also another major player for us. I'm going to turn it over to Alex, who's on the phone. I'm hoping he's unmuted, and we'll be able to have him go through from Baker Risk here.
Yes,
Alex
good
Ferguson,
evening.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Welcome. I'm going to ask you to speak nice and loudly or come in a little bit soft, please.
Okay, how about now? Is this any better?
Excellent. Thank you.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name's Alex Ferguson. I am a principal process safety consultant here at Baker Risk. Baker Risk is an international firm who specialize in risk management. We've been working in the area of risk management for the past 40 years. We have a large staff that are very involved in this work. We are involved internationally with the different groups that inform industry as well. So NFPA, the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, the Canadian Society of Chemical Engineers as well. So very familiar and very experienced with this sort of work. Next slide, please. So I have 2 background slides and 2 content slides. So just to give everyone a background on risk, defining risk, what it is. We use a very data-intensive approach to evaluate and understand the process that we're looking at and identify potential areas of hazard. So identifying those maximum credible events and where the release will happen. We look from initial production through to the final elements of material leaving site and everything in between. So there's no guesswork around what the events are. We take a holistic look throughout the whole thing. So as we're looking at assessing risk, there's 3 main pieces when we're looking at this. So start with defining the consequence, determining what that is. So it's what is going to happen if there is a loss of containment of material. So this is then used to define the endpoints of interest, the extent of the potential impact, and identify the potential vulnerabilities or exposures to the receptors incurring that. Now, this only defines the maximum impact and extent. You need to also consider the likelihood and the frequency, and this goes into the risk. So risk is calculated based on frequency estimates incorporating conditional probabilities to then kind of scale those maximum impacts. The risk is something that we accept and tolerate in everyday life, whether it's getting on a plane, crossing the street. There's inherent risk in everything that we do. So as we're looking at something in this case of assessing an industrial risk, we take a detailed look at the potential loss of containment events using industry accepted failure frequencies of all of that equipment, combined with conditional probabilities or modifiers that are considering local weather conditions, wind direction, time of day, ignition probabilities if it's a flammable material. So using advanced modeling tools within our QRA framework, fault tree analysis, we look at the site-specific operations and the historical data to assess these in a quantified way. And so this then ensures we have a thorough identification and assessment of the potential risks. Next slide, please. So as has been previously discussed, you can have your risk and define your risk, but then you need a metric to measure it against. Our metric in this case is the MIAC guidelines that are the Canadian established consensus standards. And so those were used as a benchmark for these results to provide this information here for discussion and consideration today. So there's different endpoints depending on the type of receptor. So as you get closer to potential risk source, there are restrictions on the type of use to help manage and mitigate that potential exposure. The really critical one for this discussion is that 1 in a million or 10 to the negative 6 annualized threshold. And so that can be a very hard idea or number to really conceptualize. It's a very uncommon thing. So you can think about it as things that we can do, such as taking a long haul flight, recreating like skiing for a day, or even riding a passenger train. So these are similar activities that can be chosen to do that would have a similar annualized risk. And so using this as kind of a benchmark criteria is the Canadian approach, and it's consistent with approaches globally. Next slide, please. So as I spoke, we did a very thorough look throughout the chemtrade operations. We identified over 50 potential loss of containment scenarios, including accidental railcar releases, storage releases, equipment failure associated with the rail loading area. The causes of that include human error, piping failure, equipment failure, and earthquake. This did include the worst case scenario of a full rail car release on site. And so these findings showed that that 1 in a million risk contour moves to essentially the chemtrade fence line. So that significantly reduces the impact to the community. And so these results meet or exceed that guidance that we have from MIAC. Our results were passed along to RiskTech, who did an independent, essentially, audit of the work and found that it was well-developed, credible, and defensible. One more slide, please. So here are those contours. You can see the light blue curve is your 10e-6. The green one is 1e-5, and then the dark blue is your 1e-4, staying fully within the fence line limits. So well within that guidance that is provided by the MIAC guidelines. So again, this 1e-6 curve, or 1 in a million, is similar to, say, flying on a plane, riding in public transport. So it is a very positive set of results for these risks. So thank you so much. That's the last of my slides.
Thank you.
That is everything from our side.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right, we're going to go into representations from the public at this time. I will just say, if you do have speaking notes that you'd like to share with the group, we have a black tray on the table there. And if you put your notes in there, they'll be scanned and copied and shared with the council as well and form part of the record. That's entirely up to you. But at this point, we're going to go to the list that was established ahead of time. When we get to the end of this list, don't worry, it will give lots of opportunity for people to add their name to the list, both virtually or here in person. First speaker I have is Chris Bocock, joining us here in person. And maybe we can take the presentation. Hoping to do a presentation. So you can put a thumb drive in down there. That's right. You got it. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Chris Bocock. I just retired after 30 years in the fire service from the Burnaby Fire Department. The last 4 years as the fire chief. During that period of time, I also worked 25 years specializing in industrial fire protection and emergency management, being called on the province on several occasions to represent them. Of note, when I was a 19-year-old young man living in Squamish, BC, I worked at a chlor-alkali plant there. Spent the better part of one day in the emergency room after being exposed to a chlorine leak within the facility. Pure chlorine is within a rail car is pressure. Under pressure, it's a liquid. So it's transported in a liquid form. When a release occurs, that liquid changes its form without the pressure to gas, expanding at 460 times to 1. That release poses significant risk to life. The massively expanding gas spreads across very rapidly, but stays low in at the height to be breathed in by victims. The unfortunate nature of the chemical properties of chlorine is very incapacitating due to its propensity, to attack the respiratory system. In the early 2000s, the U.S. House of Homeland Security Committee received a report and heard testimony related to the modeling of a chlorine tank car rupture in the Washington, D.C. area, at which the study done by reputable internal U.S. intelligence agencies identified potential fatalities of that rail car release of 17,500 and hospitalizations up to 100,000. Of course, the North Shore doesn't have the density that Washington, D.C. does, but extrapolation of those densities against those same risks from a same railcar release shows a potential for fatalities in the range of 2,000, with hospitalizations over 12,000 and downward exposures of 40 kilometers. The daytime downwind protection distance used by firefighters to identify lives at risk in the daytime would be 3.5 kilometers. In the downwind direction, you can see that impacts highly populated areas in all directions. The nighttime exposure area for downwind protection of lives is 8 kilometers. You can see that's significant into very heavily populated areas of the North Shore and the South Shore, Vancouver and Burnaby. The incident would be a mass casualty incident of nature precipitated by a hazmat event, and the emergency response expectation in magnitude for the density that we have in those areas would be in the range of 150 firefighters, 50 paramedics, and 30 police officers. Of note, the 3 fire departments on the North Shore have a regular daytime staffing of about 52. So this becomes a regional emergency, leaning hard on other cities and other jurisdictions and a mass movement of emergency responders to that location. The threat of chlorine is primarily a respiratory threat. You can see at even moderate to low concentrations, it's immediately dangerous to life with very short periods of sustainability before lethality. Sorry. Victims of chlorine releases are expected to be incapacitated at close locations to higher concentrations, with respiratory distress requiring rescue and removal by firefighters physically. They'll experience breathing difficulty leading to suffocation, impaired vision, vomiting, pain, chemical burns, and lung damage immediately. They'll all require rapid transportation to hospital. In my presentation, I hope council has been provided the information they need to understand that outside of a probability, the reality of an event has an incident scope that's significant, that has medical threats that are highly impactful to any citizen exposed, that the magnitude of the response is regional or better, and the fatality or risk is, the risk fatalities are extreme. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Chris Vokock. Next speaker I have is Colin Metcalf, joining us here in person as well. Welcome, and when you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you. Mayor and members of the council, my name is Colin Metcalf. I'm the president of the Pemberton Heights Community Association. But tonight, I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here as a concerned North Shore resident. I'm here tonight on behalf of those families, seniors, and children who live in our neighborhood, and on behalf of the future residents who will one day call the District of North Vancouver home. I'm speaking in strong opposition to the proposed rezoning that would permit in perpetuity the continued manufacture of liquid chlorine at the Chemtrade facility. I'm aware that this practice has been going on for many years, but this rezoning is not an abstract planning issue. It's not a theoretical risk. It's a decision about whether we allow the ongoing production of a highly lethal industrial chemical within the middle of existing and expanding residential communities. Liquid chlorine is not just another industrial input. It's a deadly substance. In sufficient concentration, it can kill within minutes. It was deadly and lethal. It was a deadly and lethal and effective killer in World War I. Today, emergency planners, first responders, and federal agencies all acknowledge that a major chlorine release, whether caused by accident, equipment failure, rail incident, or natural disaster, could expose thousands of people to serious injury or death. And let us be clear, the risk is not confined to one site. Liquid chlorine is transported by rail through North Vancouver, across the Lower Mainland, and into the United States. A single incident anywhere along that corridor could have catastrophic consequences for communities far beyond the facility. Council is being asked tonight to approve a rezoning that would lock this risk in forever. This is an extraordinary decision and an unnecessary one. Chemtrade has manufactured liquid chlorine for many years. We acknowledge that history, but longevity alone should not justify permanence. The fact that a dangerous activity has not yet resulted in tragedy does not mean it never will occur. What matters and what must be considered by council is this: Chemtrade does not need to manufacture liquid chlorine in order to serve the public good. There are safer alternative technologies available today that perform the same essential function, including water purification, without requiring the production, storage, or transportation of large volumes of liquefied chlorine gas. These alternatives are already in use across North America and around the world. They have reduced catastrophic risk. They have reduced emergency planning burdens, and most importantly, they protect human life. Why are we not implementing these alternatives here? This is not a question of shutting down water treatment. It's a question of how that treatment is supplied and what costs to the surrounding communities. The District of North Vancouver is actively planning for increased housing density, transit-oriented development, and new residential neighborhoods in the immediate vicinity of Chemtrade's operation. Council is encouraging families to live, work, and raise children there. And yet this rezoning would entrench an industrial land use that is fundamentally incompatible with that vision. You cannot responsibly plan for more homes, more schools, more seniors facilities, and more density while simultaneously approving the perpetual manufacture of a chemical that, if released, would endanger all of them. This is not about being anti-industry. This is about being pro-common sense, pro-community, and pro-responsibility. If this rezoning is approved, council will be making a conscious decision to prioritize corporate convenience over public safety, despite the availability of safer alternatives. Future councils will be bound by this decision. Future residents would bear the risk, and future generations would rightly ask why this council chose permanence over precaution. And God help us all if an incident did occur. All those affected would be holding you and your officials responsible for their misfortune. Have you done the risk assessment of what the potential financial liability to the taxpayer might be? Mayor and council, you have a duty not only to today's residents, but to tomorrow's. Land use decisions last far longer than any one term of office. This is one of those decisions. On behalf of the residents of the District of North Vancouver, I urge you to reject this rezoning. Reject the idea that deadly risk is acceptable simply because it has existed before. Reject the notion that safer alternatives are someone else's responsibility. Reject the precedent that puts residential communities in harm's way forever. Choose public safety, choose common sense, and choose a future where no family has to wonder whether a single accident could change their lives forever. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Colin Metcalf. The next speaker I have signed up is Susie Chant, who I don't see here in person, and I don't see a name online that reflects Susie Chant. Is one of the virtual participants using a name, is it Susie, but using a different name? If so, I need you to raise your virtual hand so we can identify you and bring you over to the panel. I see an attendee, North Van Seymour. That would be appropriate. There you go. Okay. We can move Susie over. MLA Chant, you should be receiving a prompt that asks you to accept. We need you to accept that before we can move you over to the panel. Okay, there we go. Okay, it looks like you're attached to the panel. MLA Chant, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Okay, thank you so very much. So as mentioned, my name is Susie Chant, and I am coming to you as a resident, a long-term resident of the North Shore and of North Vancouver. I live in Lynn Valley. And I am also coming to you as I am the MLA for North Vancouver Seymour, and I'm also a nurse by profession. All of those things I think are pertinent to this discussion. I also want to acknowledge before I start that I am joining you today from the lands of the Lekwungen people, those of the Songhees and Esquimalt, and when I'm in the District of North Vancouver, I'm on the territory of the Squamish and the Tsleil-Waututh people. And I'm so very grateful for the opportunity to address this public hearing. When I speak to you, I want to express my strongest possible support for this application. Chemtrade, first off, is an important employer in this community with, as you know, many good paying jobs full-time at its North Vancouver location. But what I'd like to focus on is the fact that the continued operation of the Chemtrade facility is of crucial importance to our safe supply of drinking water here in North Vancouver and throughout British Columbia. Chlorine is a very versatile disinfectant that kills many types of bacteria, viruses, and parasites that can cause waterborne infections. The addition of chlorine to our water supply has greatly reduced the risk of these infections and plays a major role in virtually eliminating these diseases like typhoid fever, cholera, and dysentery in developed countries. And if we put this simply, chlorine is the disinfectant of choice for water treatment experts. And the vast majority of liquid chlorine used to ensure the safety of drinking water in BC is produced right here in our community at this facility. We have no alternative domestic source that can supply enough chlorine to meet the needs of our community and others in British Columbia, right across to Saskatchewan, in fact. But if the rezoning application before this council is not approved and Chemtrade is forced to shut down the facility, the best case scenario is that the safety of our communities will be at the mercy of imported American suppliers of chlorine. The reliability of these suppliers would be contingent on the reliability of the people or the person that is controlling the US trade policy. And if I may refer to COVID, what we did find was when we needed things from the United States, they were not available because they were meeting their own needs. And after the events of the past year, I, for one, do not relish the prospect of staking the safety of what's coming out of our taps on the reliability and goodwill of the American president. And as I say, that is the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that we will no longer be able to meet our own need for liquid chlorine at all. That's because American manufacturers of liquid chlorine are several of them are shuttering their facilities, which use outmoded, environmentally unsound production techniques that employ asbestos. Even if these facilities can be modernized in a cost-effective manner, which is far from clear, doing so will still involve shutdowns that disrupt supply. The bottom line here is the safety of our communities depends on protecting our domestic supply of liquid chlorine, and the facility at 100 Amherst is an essential component of that domestic supply. As for the safety of the facility itself, I would note that it is operating with an outstanding safety record over a span of decades. I also note that the presenters have done their risk assessment, which has been validated independently, and that work has shown that the risk is greatly reduced by the work that they're anticipating making in the event that this application is approved. The record that they have is a testimony to the diligence of an exemplary workforce, a strong safety culture that is fostered and upheld by their employer, and major investments in increased safety that Chemtrade has made over the years, with even more improvements to come if this application is approved. There is a lot of at stake here. I don't want to get sick from anything that is because we don't have chlorine in our water. I don't want that, and neither do you. I truly urge you to approve this application, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your comments, Susie Chant. The next presenter I have is Patrick Stafford Smith, I believe also joining us virtually. Patrick, if you could raise your virtual hand, we'll get you moved over to the panel. There we go. Hey, Patrick, it looks like you're moved over to the panel, but you are still muted in the system. If you could unmute.
There we go.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Clearly, welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Great. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Patrick Stafford Smith. I'm the CEO with the North Vancouver Chamber of Commerce. And I'm speaking today to state that the North Vancouver Chamber strongly supports this Chemtrade's application. Chemtrade's continued investment ensures that North Vancouver remains home to an existing, viable, long-term, and safe operating major employer and a critical regional supplier supporting essential community services to North Vancouver, across BC and across Western Canada. As we've heard, this project will secure more than 120 well-paid, skilled jobs, sustain a network of local suppliers and contractors, and strengthen the municipal tax base that funds vital community infrastructure. In the current climate of global trade uncertainty and U.S. tariffs, this investment also strengthens Canada's domestic industrial capacity, something that really is required right now, as we've heard, and safeguards supply chains that are vital for both public utilities and regional industries. By diversifying trade and supporting value-added production close to home, Chemtrade helps improve local and regional economic and community resilience across the North Shore, across Metro Vancouver, and Western Canada. So to me, this project reflects a forward-looking approach to job protection and creation, and that's well-paid jobs, industrial modernization, and that investment benefits the community in so many ways, and regional economic and community stability. And I think all of these priorities align with the long-term prosperity of North Vancouver. And I think that's really what I have to say. And I'd really like to thank you all for having the time, or giving me the time to speak today.
Thank you for your comments, Patrick Stafford Smith. The next speaker I have is Charlie Grahn, joining us here in person. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you very much. Your Worship, councillors, my name's Charlie Grahn. I'm here representing myself and my family. I live in East Vancouver, across the water from the Chemtrade facility. I am not in a trading relationship with Chemtrade. I don't, in fact, know anybody that works there. I don't have an interest in any company that trades with them or has a prospect of doing so. I'm speaking in favor of the application. And the reason I want to explain how Chemtrade came to my attention. At the tail end of the pandemic, I was walking with my oldest daughter along the trail on the south side of Burrard Inlet. And she pointed over at the white pile and asked me what it was. And I very confidently told her that it was zinc. But I wasn't really sure that my answer was correct. So I went home, looked up the company online, sent them an email, and the next morning I was informed that I was in fact incorrect, that it was salt. So I corrected the record with my daughter, but the company did more than simply give me accurate information. They invited me and my daughter on a tour of the facility. So 10 days later, we had the occasion to visit the site. The company spent a lot of time with us. And I want to emphasize that this was long before this application was ever brought forward. This was 5 years ago. For 2.5 hours, they allowed us to crawl all over the site. They showed us what they did, the public benefit, and they also disclosed the dangers. The reason I wanted to speak here this evening was to tell you that I think, and this is something that I think may not be obvious to consider, there is moral hazard if we do not show companies that display this sort of openness and transparency, who are engaged with the public, who communicate what they're doing, how they do it. If they're not showing consideration, then bad actors are not incented to emulate this standard. So I've been on the mailing list for the last 5 years for the company. They informed me of the opportunity to speak here this evening. I wanted to share the benefit of my experience with them as a local resident and somebody who is a neighbor just separated by a small patch of water. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Charles Grahn. The next speaker I have joining us here in person is David Cinnamon. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is David Cinnamon, and as you know, I've had a chance to speak with you all in the time leading up to tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I want to again be clear about why I'm here and why I feel a responsibility to comment on this rezoning. First, It's critical that I reinforce that my advocacy on this issue is only about public safety. The way it has been for the past 20 years, others may want you to believe something else. I was born and raised in Edmonton. I'm a Canadian business person and investor. For more than 30 years, I've worked in and around the chemical sector. For over 20 years, I've been directly involved in reducing public safety risks associated with chlorine production and transportation. In Northern California, work I led helped reduce chlorine risk exposure for a population of roughly 20 million people by 95%. My perspective tonight is based on real-world experience and how these risks evolve and how they can be reduced. While I'm not a resident of North Vancouver, I do have a lot of family in the area. That makes this decision personal as well as professional. The issue before you tonight is not whether clean drinking water is important. Of course it is. The issue is whether approving rezoning that entrenches or expands the manufacturing and movement of liquid chlorine, a highly hazardous material, is the safest way to meet that need. Liquid chlorine is classified as a toxic inhalation hazard. If released, it can form a dense ground-level gas cloud that travels downwind, affects large areas very quickly. Exposure can cause severe respiratory injury or worse, particularly for children and seniors and people with existing health conditions. When chlorine is manufactured and transported, especially by rail, the risk profile changes significantly. Rail incidences do occur. Most are minor, but the consequences of a chlorine release can be severe. That is why responsible risk management does not focus only on probability. It focuses on consequence. One principle has guided my work in the chemical industry for decades. You don't manage risk by hoping nothing happens. You manage risk by reducing the consequences if something does. Residents have been told that the chlorine production is essential for safe drinking water. This statement is extremely incomplete. Across North America, over 90% of water treatment facilities no longer allow chlorine gas on site because of the hazard. Instead, they use alternatives like bleach. Our due diligence shows that 100% of the North Vancouver water treatment facilities already use bleach-based solutions rather than chlorine gas. These are government-owned facilities, your peers. Sodium hypochlorite does not carry that same toxic inhalation hazard as bulk chlorine. So the real choice is not water versus no water. The real choice is high consequence risk versus no consequence risk. This distinction matters, particularly in a community like North Vancouver, where industrial sites sit so close to homes, transit corridors, and growing residential density. Risk that may appear manageable on paper feels very different to people living nearby. Rezoning decisions are not just about land use, they're about where long-term risk is placed. Once that risk is embedded in a community, it becomes very difficult to reverse. It's also important to recognize that the applicant has had nearly 40 years to find and implement a safer solution. This existence of wildly adopted alternatives across North America shows that change is not theoretical. It is already the norm nearly everywhere. No one here is anti-industry. Strong communities need strong economies. But strong economies evolve, they modernize as knowledge improves. Leadership means guiding that evolution responsibly. So my ask tonight is simple and direct. I respectfully urge council to deny this rezoning application as it stands. We do not need to continue to manufacture liquid chlorine in North Vancouver. Safer, widely used alternatives exist for a long time now, and approving this rezoning would unnecessarily lock this community for decades to come. My last comment, the applicant can easily and affordably produce bleach on site and service all the water treatment while completely eliminating the risks for their employees and their community while no jobs are lost. Thank you for your time and for the responsibility you carry in servicing this community.
For your comments, David Cinnamon. The next speaker I have is Robin Kinsley. Robin Kinsley joining us virtually.
Yeah, hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, clearly. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to
Okay.
address the hearing.
Thank you. I'll turn my video on too.
We can hear you.
Okay, great.
There you
So
go.
good
Yeah.
evening, and thank you to the mayor and council for inviting me to speak on behalf of the North American chlorine industry. My name is Robin Kinsley. I'm Vice President of Transportation, Emergency Preparedness, and Regulatory Affairs at the Chlorine Institute. I'm a chemical engineer with a master's degree in business, and I've served as a staff lead for transportation issues since 2010. Over the past 20 years, our industry, working closely with the US and Canadian governments, has made major advancements in chlorine rail safety, beginning with the design of the chlorine tank car itself. Key enhancements include stronger valve protection designed to withstand rollovers, reducing the chance of valve damage during a derailment. A significantly stronger tank, approximately 1 inch thick with reinforced tank heads, increasing test and burst pressures by 20%. 4 inches of thermal protection in an outer steel jacket, which slows internal pressure rise in the event of a fire. 1/2 inch full height head shields on both ends of the car's outer jacket for additional impact protection. These improvements substantially reduce the likelihood of a release, even in accidents. The US and Canadian governments have a scheduled phase out of the older railcar designs of December 31st, 2027. All chlorine railcars used by Chemtrade already meet these enhanced standards. In addition to the tank car design, there are strong rail operating requirements that further protect communities. The Association of American Railroads sets standards for all freight cars and establishes key train operating rules for trains carrying chlorine. These include speed restrictions, route designations, inspections and detector requirements, guidelines on storage and rail yards, incident notification protocols, and real-time railcar information for first responders through the Ask Rail mobile app. Federal regulators in Canada and the US have also implemented important safeguards, including positive train control, which reduces accidents caused by human error, security and route risk analyses for hazmat movements, chain of custody, monitoring and reporting requirements, and risk reduction programs that require railroads to proactively identify and mitigate safety risks. These layers of standards and regulations work together to ensure chlorine is transported as safely as possible. The Chlorine Institute works with its members to periodically review and update industry best practices that help ensure the continued safe transportation of chlorine by rail from the time a rail car is loaded at a production facility to the time it is unloaded at a customer facility. Thanks to enhanced tank car designs, modern rail operating practices, and strong industry standards, chlorine transportation safety has improved considerably. Starting at a very low base level, releases from chlorine rail cars have decreased by 91% since 2006 in the United States. Over that same period, Canada has experienced 0 chlorine rail car releases. Today, 99.99% of all hazmat rail cars reach their destination without a release. And while some enhanced chlorine rail cars have been involved in derailments, none have released chlorine, which validates the success of the upgraded design. To further protect the public, the Chlorine Institute maintains a 24/7 North American Emergency Response Mutual Aid Network called CHLOREP, which stands for the Chlorine Emergency Plan. This network includes more than 90 industry response teams, 25 member companies, support from 14 specialized emergency response contractor companies, and coverage across North America, including teams from Chemtrade and other responders in British Columbia and Alberta. When an emergency call is made to the recommended emergency call centers in the US and Canada, responders are immediately connected with the chlorine shipper or the designated CHLOREP team, which remains engaged until the incident is fully resolved. The Chlorine Institute also trains first responders across North America to provide a general awareness of chlorine emergency response and to ensure first responders know they can depend on the CHLOREP network to assist with chlorine emergencies. In summary, chlorine tank cars and rail operations have undergone significant safety improvements. These improvements have led to a sharp reduction in releases, including 0 releases from the enhanced design tank cars involved in derailments, The chlorine industry continues to work closely with rail partners and regulators to advance safety. And through ChlorUp, we ensure that highly trained response teams are available at all times for chlorine emergencies. And thank you again for the opportunity to speak. Happy to answer any questions. And I will note I did submit written comments earlier today that provides additional details on the topics I hit on tonight. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Robin Kinsley. The next speaker I have is Michael Graveson, joining us here in person. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
This goes.
Yeah, you're in the ballpark there. There's a thumb drive spot, and it should auto pop up on the screen there.
Okay. Everybody having fun yet? Mayor Little, Council, my name is Michael Graveson. I am a consultant for the chemical industry. I've been doing this for over 40 years. I've spent hundreds of hours reading every single word of every document that you guys have received. And quite frankly, I have to say, there's missing information and there's misinformation. That's why I'm really glad to have the opportunity to speak today. So these are the points I'd like to highlight today. First of all, you don't need rail cars of liquid chlorine to treat the water. Canadian water is not treated directly with chlorine. It's treated with bleach. Less than 5% of Chemtrade's chlorine goes indirectly to water treatment in Western Canada. The safety improvements proposed by Chemtrade are insufficient to protect you. I really think you need to focus on the rail cars. Now, when you think of chlorine, you probably think of what you put in your pool or your laundry. Let me be absolutely clear. That is not chlorine. That's bleach, also called sodium hypochlorite. What Chemtrade makes is a deadly gas. It was used actually in World War I as a weapon. Now, the vast majority of water treatment in Canada and the US uses bleach, not chlorine. Water treatment companies do not want to use the gas. They had this meeting years ago and they voted for the safer alternative, which is bleach. They also use UV and other things, but extremely rarely do they use the chlorine gas. This is a diagram from Metro Vancouver's website. Don't worry about all of the busyness. What's important to know is, and this is the water you guys get from North Vancouver, they use sodium hypochlorite to treat their water. I spoke to most of the major water treatment facilities in British Columbia and Alberta in the last couple of weeks, just to confirm, make sure that my information was correct. And I have the information if anybody wants to speak to anybody, I have the contact information if you need it. Now, Chemtrade often refer to a survey from Statistics Canada in 2015. Here's the actual quote from StatsCan. Chlorination remained the most common disinfection process and was applied to 96% of all drinking water produced in 2015. Here's what Chemtrade writes. 96% of Canadian municipalities use chlorine to treat their drinking water supply. That's not a typo. That was done on purpose so that you would think that their chlorine goes directly to water treatment. It does not. They did that so you would think that without their chlorine, you can't treat the water. Incorrect. Over 90% of chlorination is bleach, not chlorine. That's why StatsCan use the word chlorination, not chlorine. This is a diagram from one of Chemtrade's websites. And what you see here is their chlorine either goes to a water treatment plant or a bleach plant, which unfortunately is off-site. Also incorrect. None of their liquid chlorine goes directly from Chemtrade to a water treatment plant. None. It goes to a bleach plant off-site where they convert it to the safer alternative, which is bleach. They put it in trucks and they ship it safely to the water treatment plant. But what's ironic is that most of their chlorine doesn't go to either one. It goes to the United States in rail cars through the DNV and Greater Vancouver area. The solution we're talking about today is simple. Just make the bleach on site, eliminate the middleman, eliminate the risk, water gets treated, no jobs lost. Now let's talk about safety. Two of the major proposals that Chemtrade is making is, number one, they're going to reduce the stored liquid chlorine on site to an absolute minimum. Their words, absolute minimum. What do we have currently? At any given time, there's approximately 3,000 tons on site, 90 tons in fixed storage and 3,000 tons in rail cars. What are they proposing to do? To remove the 90 tons in fixed storage. There's still 3,000 tons in rail cars. And by the way, rail cars are less safe than bulk fixed storage. The second point they want to make, they're going to put a building to load the chlorine rail cars. I'll admit, that's a good idea. Most have already done it. But the cars have to leave the building eventually. So you got 2 to 4 rail cars inside the building while you have 191 cars with 3,000 tons outside the building on the plant tracks. Now, in 2016, Axial in West Virginia have a very similar building that Chemtrade is proposing. A stored rail car left the building, and shortly after it left, it leaked, lost all of its contents, led to a mass evacuation and significant impact to the local population. But forget all of the chlorine on site for a second. The biggest threat to the DNV remains the over 1,000, actually it's over 1,200, but I'm trying to be conservative, full rail cars of hazardous liquid chlorine that are shipped from Chemtrade through the DNV in Greater Vancouver every year. They don't talk about that.
You could draw to a close. Otherwise, I can sign you up to speak at the beginning of the next segment as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael Graveson, for your comments. The next speaker I have is Colin Armstrong, joining us here in person. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing. You can probably, I don't think that's your presentation. So you can probably close that one.
It's not.
And then you might see pop up. There you go.
All right. Good evening. My name is Colin Armstrong. I'm a principal engineer with Accutech, a global leader in the management and assessment of hazardous chemical risks. I'm a chemical engineer with 17 years of experience in the operation and risk assessment of hazardous chemical processes, and I've served as an expert on chemical process hazards for private companies and federal agencies as part of regulatory enforcement actions and investigations. I've led hundreds of risk assessment studies, including for chlorine producers like Chemtrade. I've been involved firsthand in incidents that have occurred in facilities I've worked in, and I've led the immediate investigation of multiple toxic gas leaks after they've occurred. I've seen the boots left on the ground from a man who didn't make it out of a toxic gas cloud. This is personal. Sorry, I did miss. Move that forward. Accutech is also the lead author of the Center for Chemical Process Safety Industry Guidelines on Chemical Transport Risk Assessment, which is relevant in this case. It's important to assess risks, a combination of likelihood and consequence, but the consequences of credible catastrophic accidents must be considered and planned for. Likelihood analysis tells us how likely something is to occur, or if we continue, when it will happen, assuming a long enough time period. Risk analysis lets us know how many times we can roll the dice before we might lose. Consequence analysis tells us how much we are gambling. Chemtrade presented a risk analysis of their on-site chlorine production and loading focused on the likelihood and risk, and they proposed risk mitigations for these production and loading processes at their site. We reviewed the report presented by Chemtrade. We didn't redo their study. It assessed the on-site risks following standard practices. Rather, we assessed risks beyond the study. What are the risks to the public after these fully loaded rail cars roll out of the containment building and make their way through the metropolitan area? We conducted a consequence and quantitative risk analysis of the 32 full chlorine rail cars that are stored at the site and the 1,000 rail cars that are shipped from the site through North Vancouver and the Vancouver metro area. Some of these rail cars are sent to Langley, where they're converted to bleach. Others are exported to the United States for use in US industry as pure chlorine. For illustration here, we're looking at the risk profile of those rail cars as they move towards Langley. The study's been provided electronically to the council as well. We talk about potential consequence first, not just the risk. The potential consequence here is that from a credible chlorine rail accident is that a large toxic gas release could occur, resulting in massive exposures. We conducted this release and dispersion modeling using FAST, an industry standard for assessing chemical hazards. The red contour shows us the limit or the extent of potentially life-threatening effects from a chlorine railcar release. With the high population density in the Vancouver metro area, up to 2,000 fatalities could occur from a toxic cloud from a chlorine rail accident, with life-threatening effects extending up to 4 kilometers. This is the potential consequence. Previous incidents have occurred. Derailments do occur on a regular basis. We understand too that it's less likely for chlorine rail cars to leak, but as the Chlorine Institute representative stated, it is still possible. On the left, we see an incident of a chlorine rail car accident that resulted in 8 deaths and 75 hospitalizations. On the right, a recent incident where a 25-ton chlorine gas explosion in the Port of Jordan resulted in 13 deaths, 265 injuries. This occurred in 2022. Thankfully, that was 7 kilometers from the city. The city was put entirely under a shelter in place and completely closed to incoming traffic. We took the next steps beyond evaluation of the consequence to assess the likelihood and the risk with a quantitative risk assessment. That risk analysis was based on actual accident statistics from the Transportation Safety Board of Canada. We used the same risk criteria used in the Baker study. This is what we see: 131 schools in an intolerable exposure of risk to chlorine gas from that rail transport. More than 15 nursing facilities. Each point you see on that map is a school or a daycare that is exposed above the allowable risk criteria. Risk mitigation must be implemented. The proposed mitigations which stop at the containment building are inadequate, and the risk of chlorine rail transport cannot be ignored. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Colin Armstrong. The next speaker I have is Jess Hannard.
Right here, drive. Your drive.
Thank you.
Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you. I'd like to play a video before I begin to speak, if that's okay.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Will this?
Hopefully it's in a format that we can play. We've had some challenges with that in the past.
I'm Jess Connard. I'm from East Palestine, Ohio. In 2023, a train on fire went through my backyard and derailed 2 miles from my home. We heard there was to be an imminent explosion.
Sparks from an apparent wheel bearing overheat were seen at least 43 minutes before the train derailed.
Mr. Shaw, is it normal for trains to catch fire, for the wheels to catch fire? Is that something that normally happens?
No.
In order to prevent the explosion, officials opted to blow holes into the sides of 5 rail cars, drain the vinyl chloride into a soil ditch, and light it on fire. And when I got home, I remember seeing this big black plume. It looked like a tornado that was coming from the ground. We were actually told that the smell wasn't toxic. That week, I felt terrible. I was laid down sick. My son, a couple months later, was diagnosed with asthma. The Center for Disease Control came to my community, stated that we had been exposed to this toxic chemical, vinyl chloride, which we know is a carcinogen, and that there wasn't anything that they could do for our exposures, but that they would be able to treat our cancers. The East Palestine train derailment was preventable. The chemical disaster was unnecessary. And I think that these are important things to take away as we catalyze the crisis in order to prevent train derailments across the country.
Thank you. I'm going to just minimize this. My name is Jess Connard, and I'm a community member from East Palestine, Ohio, in the United States. I traveled a long way here to deliver this message. I urge you to defer or deny this rezoning. It could save your community. I will never forget the day a chemical bomb train was on fire in my backyard. 63 fire departments from 3 states responded. The cause of the derailment fire was mechanical. Train derailments are regular and predictable. And in my country, train derailments happen 3 times a day, which is why I'm here today and also why I started a nonprofit called Rail Watch to prevent train derailments from happening in North America. Train derailments in Canada are also not rare events. They still happen every day. And while the industry will tell you that most of these happen in rail yards, there is a major predictable main track derailment of dangerous goods in Canada every 4 days. So you have to ask, why put deadly liquid chlorine on a rickety rail line that runs through backyards and gambles with the lives of North Vancouver residents? The vinyl chloride stayed in my community because of a weather inversion, but the chlorine will stay in your community whether or not. Chlorine is generally shipped in DOT 105 rail cars, and in 2016, as mentioned, the DOT 105 rail car cracked and leaked chlorine. The entire load was released in 2.5 hours. It's not a matter of if, but when a DOT 105 rail car cracks again, it could devastate this community like mine. Even with the new standards, normalized steel has a ductile to brittle transition temperature. This means that it becomes less effective as the temperature drops. And extending each life of the rail car from 20 years to 50 years of service to align with the US standards is not a pro-safety decision, but an economic one that puts profits over people. With all due respect, it is unwise to make a rezoning decision based solely on what happens within the factory's property line for the very reason, for the precaution, the chlorine reaches that line. Because all of the North Van residents, they live outside that line where a derailment could occur. Those are the people that put you in charge and that you are also charged to protect. Trust me, these chemicals do not know any boundaries. Since the derailment in my community, my co-parent has permanent retinal damage in his eye. My son was diagnosed with asthma. I have repeated skin rashes you saw. Endocrine issues. We have women having miscarriages and girls starting their period at ages 6 and 7 years old. Compliance is a minimum bar. It is not a safety guarantee for a community. There is a World War I chemical weapon traveling through the heart of North Vancouver, and there doesn't have to be. The new rail car is like improving cigarette filters. It might help a bit, but it doesn't eliminate the danger. The real solution is not better filters. It's removing the cigarette. You can remove the chlorine from your tracks. I urge you to defer or deny this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Jess Connard. The next speaker I have is Jennifer Law, maybe joining us online. Let's just look for a name that matches that.
She should be retired.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Jennifer Law. I can hear you, but it's very faint. So if I can have you speak directly into your microphone, that will help us. Welcome. When you're ready, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Little and Council. My name is Jennifer Law, and I'm here on behalf of Vancouver Fraser Port Authority to express our support for Chemtrade's rezoning application to enable redevelopment of their facility on Amherst Avenue. Chemtrade has been a responsible tenant of ours at this location for several decades. Over that time, they have made significant investments in continuous improvement for safety at their facility, meeting or exceeding the high standards of their industry. We also recognize that Chemtrade's facility plays an integral role in securing Canada's safe drinking water supply. With this context, we executed a letter of intent with Chemtrade to enable the extension of their lease from its current expiry of June 2032 to a new expiry of December 2044. As part of Chemtrade's considerations, the extension is subject to the District of North Vancouver's approval of their rezoning application. I understand that there is a question about why the port is requiring removal of chlorine manufacturing facilities from our land by 2030. As part of the current lease with Chemtrade, there is a sunset clause that asks for the removal of liquid chlorine by 2030, and the letter of intent is just upholding this existing arrangement. We recognize that there may be existing inconsistencies due to historic agreements, but we are making efforts where possible to reconcile and align leases with the Port Authority's land use plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Jennifer Law. The next speaker I have is Griff Marshall, I believe joining us here in person. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Mayor Little and Council, my name is Griff Marshall. I'm a resident of North Vancouver from the Lynn Valley area. I'm here to speak in favor of the requested rezoning application by Chemtrade. To start, I would like to state that I do not work for, nor do I have any affiliation with Chemtrade. I do, however, have experience with the chemical industry, having spent my working career at one of the largest global chemical companies. Chemtrade would have been viewed as a competitor in one of the business segments of my former employer. I should also state that I was not directly involved in the chlor-alkali business, which is the production of chlorine and caustic soda, although chlorine was an upstream feedstock to the process of the business I was involved in. I would like to make comments related to 3 general subjects: industrial activity in North Vancouver, domestic production of key materials, and safe business operation of facilities. Number 1 is industrial activity in North Van. For the District of North Vancouver to be a viable, thriving municipality, it needs to have a reasonable mix of residential areas along with retail, commercial, and industrial zones. The business areas provide services and employment for people in the district and contribute to the local tax base. Chemtrade has had a long time operations in North Van, making significant tax contributions and providing a good number of relatively high-paying jobs. Second point is domestic production of key materials. Especially in today's market environment, it is truly important that Canada is able to manufacture materials that are key to its ongoing needs. Chlorine is one such product, as it is central as a disinfectant for drinking water and for treating wastewater. As stated in Chemtrade publications, the Chemtrade North Vancouver plant supplies approximately 70% of the chlorine used in Western Canada, or stated another way, 40% of the liquid chlorine available in all of Canada. Without that supply, we would have to rely on imports from the USA. In today's political environment, relying on supply from the USA represents a potential risk factor for us in Vancouver, in British Columbia, and in all of Canada for that matter. The third point is safe business operation of facilities. The preceding two subjects of industrial activity in North Van and domestic production of key materials are of far less significance if the materials in question are not made in a safe and environmentally sound fashion. To that end, I think that it is worth noting that Chemtrade North Vancouver production site has had an exemplary record when it comes to safe operations. Chemtrade actively follows the guidelines for responsible care, which is a globally recognized standard that covers safe handling of chemicals through the full life cycle. If Chemtrade is granted a rezoning permit and an extended lease with the Port of Vancouver, they have pledged to spend approximately $50 million to upgrade the safety of their liquid chlorine rail car loading area. This upgrade would effectively mean that the tank car loading would be isolated under a protective dome so that any chlorine that might leak would be contained within the isolation area and would not escape the plant site. In addition, their new procedures would essentially eliminate any large volume storage of chlorine on site, since production would be loaded into rail tank cars soon after manufacture and shipped off site. Risk of a large volume release of chlorine in this scenario would be less likely. Chemtrade and other industrial plant operations in the nearby area under the Second Narrows Bridge support regular community interactions and communications through the Community Advisory Panel, aka the CAP. I participate in CAP meetings, and I encourage anyone who may be interested or have concerns come out to CAP. It's open to the public. The CAP provides a forum for discussion of topics related to industrial activity in that particular area in the District of North Van. This includes safety performance and future plans, etc., for the various companies there. Proactive discussion and debate is a far better way of reaching understanding rather than trying to calm down parties that may have heightened concerns that are based on partial or incorrect information. In summary, I feel that approval of the rezoning application would be positive for our local community, taxes and jobs. We need reliable, responsible companies running their businesses in North Van, as well as a positive factor in making Canada more self-sufficient in the manufacture of an important product, chlorine. My support is based on my previous experience in the chemical industry, as well as what I've learned through participation in the Community Advisory Panel, attending open house events and tours of the Chemtrade plant. I would encourage anyone who has questions or concerns to check things out with Chemtrade on their own. Be informed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments, Griff Marshall. Next speaker I have is George Mackay joining us, or George Mackay joining us virtually. We're going to move them over to the panel. I will just say, just as a process question for tonight, we have washrooms across the hall. If you need to get up and use them, please feel free. We're going to have a little bit of a stand-up stretch at about after we've gone through this list, which should take us to about 5 after 9, maybe around there. And then we're going to come back, and staff have been receiving some clarifying questions from council. So we're going to have an opportunity then to respond to the clarifying questions we've had, and then we'll continue on with the public list after that point. So just checking in, George Mackay, can you hear me?
I can. Can you see and hear me?
I can hear you clearly. We're going to have to spotlight you to get you up on the screen, but we can hear you clearly. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the council.
Okay, thanks very much for having me. And I appreciate some of the earlier speakers. So I'm George Mackay. I live at 2728 Dollarton Highway, which is about 2 kilometers from Chemtrade at a pretty much a similar elevation, sea level, practically elevation. Our family has lived at the property since 1976. In the mid through late 1980s, my parents were very involved in lobbying the district council at the time for the removal of Hooker Chemicals, which is now Chemtrade, from its current location. These efforts were successful as far as the district ultimately determining, as far as I understand it, the continued operation of a major chlorine plant at this location was not and is not in the best interests of the district and Greater Vancouver generally. I attend this meeting to voice our family's objection and concern that the district may now be considering to allow Chemtrade to stay at this location long term. This use is not compatible with acceptable community master planning, as the district and Greater Vancouver move every year towards becoming one of the world's best cities. The land occupied by chemtrade should be remediated and redeveloped for housing, offices, light industrial, retail, and/or community uses, especially those that give access to and rehabilitate this section of Burrard Inlet. I think this would be a better use and ultimately generate more tax revenue for the district than having a major chlorine plant at this location. Chemtrade states, and it might be true, that it's one of the largest producers of chlorine in Canada. For me, this is all the more reason to have this facility at a location suitable for heavy industrial operations, and with either no or a much smaller number of people living near it. As I understand it, and I could be slightly incorrect in this, the federal government does not want and won't allow this use on their land. If the federal government has promised a very significant amount of money to the district to compensate us for having this unacceptable use exclusively on land within the district, unless that exists, which I think is something to be considered, then it's more than time to move on and go in the direction of a better and more acceptable use for this property. In my opinion, we do not and should not bear the responsibility of being one of the biggest producers of chlorine for Canada. If it's strategically important to Canada to accommodate this use, the federal government should have it on their land in a suitable location. In 2026, with our family having tried to champion this issue since the mid-1980s, I think we're beyond wanting to have a major chlorine plant within our boundaries. This is once in a generation opportunity to do something about it. I very much appreciate the information shared with the previous speakers, and those that have objected to this, I strongly support what they had to say, and I've been very educated by what they have had to say, and I'll leave it for your consideration. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your comments, George McKay. The next speaker I have is Rick Hind. Check the virtual list for Rick.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, clearly. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you. My name is Rick Hind, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm in Washington, D.C. I spent the last 30 years working on environmental issues, mostly with Greenpeace, but other groups as well. I first got involved in disaster prevention after Bhopal, 1984. Thousands of people were killed by the Union Carbide facility that leaked in the middle of the night, methyl isocyanate, and people died in their sleep and all day the next day. That disaster was actually predicted by reporters in the area, journalists, one journalist in particular, who was vilified and disregarded until this happened. And I think it just shows you that there's a lot of reasons why it happened. The same kind of facility was already in Institute, West Virginia, same company, and it had a near miss within a year after that. So the claims of safety are, I think, overconfident, if not dishonest. These places are human run and mistakes can be made. In the case of chlorine, I worked in international treaty work at the UN, and then in legislative work in Washington on national legislation and regulatory policy with EPA. In fact, during the 2006 period, we were also working on railroad safety, and there was railroad safety and security legislation. Because of the 9/11 attacks, all of these issues became a security issue as well. And I don't know if the risk assessments involved in this particular project took into account the wild card of, let's just say, bad actor, because terrorist is an exotic term, and it could be from anywhere. Who would have predicted the bombing of Oklahoma City by right-wing U.S. individuals? If you haven't already, I would hope that you amend this by calling for strongly recommend a comprehensive assessment of ability to respond to a catastrophic event like this. And that means using the worst case scenario. And do you have the people, the firefighters, the places in the hospital, all of that to do with that? I sincerely doubt that any community is prepared for that in reality. During that time, around 2006, actually, I was very happy to meet David Cinnamon, actually. He was coming to town to work on the same thing with promoting a safer alternative to chlorine operations. And he became one of the industry allies to our coalition of unions, environmentalists, and security experts who felt that legislation was needed. It ultimately was passed through Homeland Security. I shared the first Homeland Security legislation in 2006 with you, which makes the point that the EPA's worst case scenario is not the worst case scenario, that they recommend that more than twice as bad if you assume it's an actor that is intending to hurt and kill people. So I think it's very important to keep in mind all of the possible hazards. Risk is a kind of roll of the dice. Hazard is a real thing. And I sincerely hope you will not only deny this, but also encourage chemical trade to do what David Cinnamon recommended, which is to use the safer alternative and provide that same amount of chlorine, I should say, anti. Sorry. I'm looking at the clock instead of concentrating on what I'm saying. Anyway, it's unnecessary and it shouldn't be renewed the way it is. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you very much for your comments, Rick Hind. The next speaker I have on the list, Nikolai Goropich, has actually sent us a note declining to speak next. So we'll move on to the next person, which is Peter Teven, joining us here in person.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I have a presentation I put together here. Yes, thank you. For the record, Peter Tevan, 1900 Block Indian River Crescent. I'm here representing myself as a resident and not speaking on behalf of any organization that I volunteer for. I did not seek that approval, so it was also not denied. I come to you to talk about some of the concerns I have with this plan. Now, first of all, let me say that I've been to a bunch of public information meetings with Chemtrade. I have listened to everything they've said. I find them to be highly professional. I believe them to be very competent. Any of the concerns that I raise really have nothing to do with Chemtrade's operation within their own buildings. But one of the things that came out at one of the public meetings was there was a volunteer firefighter who attended and turned me onto this piece of software. I actually spoke with Chief Danks. He's also familiar with this piece of software. It's called ERG 2024. And my understanding of this software is it is the tool that fire and rescue services use to determine, in the event of an emergency, how large is the area that needs to be locked down or evacuated. Now, my concern is I have a high degree of confidence in Chemtrade. I don't trust CN Rail as far as I can throw a rail car. And once that chlorine is put into a rail car, This is a little tracing on a map of the spur line that it travels before it gets to the marshalling yard and the CN yard on the North Shore. And these two spots that I've put with highlights are the crossings, which are completely uncontrolled and poorly maintained at Riverside Drive and Mountain Highway. Riverside Drive has possibly the most commercial heavy-duty truck traffic on the whole North Shore. That's the road into the transfer station, the concrete plant, et cetera, et cetera. And it runs all the time. Mountain Highway is another one. That is the main entrance into Lintern. Constant, heavy commercial truck traffic. And that one, I haven't inspected that one myself, but I don't think it's a controlled crossing either. This is a list that I got off Wikipedia of just Canadian rail accidents resulting in injuries or deaths. And of these ones I counted, CN is in all of these except for 3. And this is that ERG software. This would be what happens if a heavy truck punctures a rail car, just one rail car, at the rail spur in Riverside. This would be in the summer winds. And you see where it says large spill at nighttime and there's a little blue dot? That's where I live. That's why I'm concerned about this. I'm right there. Prevailing winter winds kind of go the opposite direction. Have fun, Vancouver and Burnaby. I guess that's why the retired Burnaby fire chief came here tonight. This is Mountain Highway. Similar zone. Prevailing winds. And this is all really, what time of day does this happen? How big is it? Is there a fire involved? Which makes it even worse. This is no fire, this zone. So that's my concern. Now, grade 9 chemistry. I don't know if you had Mrs. Lau, but she taught me pretty good. Chlorine, chemical formula Cl. Hydrogen, remember that talk? You guys approved a hydrogen production facility at the bottom of the second red arrow, immediately across the fence from where the rail cars are stored. Grade 9 chemistry, H2 plus Cl, hydrochloric acid. That's not inside the proposed building, is it? One of the things that I find very interesting, Council, is listening to the testimony tonight, because when we read the news story about the memorandum of understanding between Port Metro Vancouver and Chemtrade, you would have thought Port Metro Vancouver thought this was a fantastic idea. But what's obvious from the staff report is they're like, yeah, great idea for you, but we ain't letting that go on our land. It's stopping in 2030. I don't understand how we could be even talking about this. And the staff report earlier said it's consistent with our OCP. The question before you is to amend the OCP because it specifically is forbidden under the OCP. I'll come back and talk a little more by your leave after.
Thank you very much. Next speaker I have is Eric Anderson.
Well, Mayor Little, members of council,
welcome.
I have decided to decline. I've heard things tonight that I was not aware of and that have made me at least one or two reconsider my position. So I'm not going to say anything, and thanks for your time.
Okay. Declined. Thank you. Okay. As I said, we're going to take a short break right now. Let's say 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to do a double check in with staff and see how ready we are to respond to the council questions at that point. But we'll have a short break now for people to have a bio break or a stretch. So we do have a fair number of questions that have come in from council. And what we're going to do is we're going to have staff read those questions into the record and then give their response. If they don't have the information at their hand, they may ask a call upon the applicant to provide additional information. And also there's a chance we may not be able to provide the information on the spot this evening, in which case we'll have to decide how to handle that at that time. So at this point, I'm going to go over to staff to read the questions into the record and give their responses.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. We have in total 25 questions. I'm going to read them one by one. The first question we receive is, do we know why the port is requiring removal of chlorine manufacturing facilities on their lands by 2030? Have any accidents involved chlorine leaks occurred at this site in the past? Has this led to death or injury at this site in the past? I think Jennifer Law from the port has already provided response to this question. And I think as she said, that the reason may related to the port mandate, and she recognized there is a historic inconsistency between the past lease and then the new lease moving forward, and they're trying to stay within their land use plan mandate.
Mayor Little,
any additional?
Mayor Little,
Yeah.
just on that question
Yes.
though, like, I think it's important for us to understand that additional information. We can't assume to know the port's mandate and exactly why something that's existed for so long does no longer conform.
So just to be clear, the has been very clear about that. They identified that manufacturing had to be removed from all port jurisdiction lands in order to facilitate more space for trade enabling businesses and industries. And so this is a broad moratorium across all of the FPA's lands in the Lower Mainland that they're discontinuing manufacturing processes.
Okay, so that was the information we needed to be provided. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yanzang?
Second part of the question is, to have any accidents involving chlorine leaks occurred at this site in the past? I'm going to ask the applicant to provide that just on the lease portion of your facility.
Welcome, Dale.
Should I state my name again?
Yes, please, for the record.
Dale Bosons with Chemtrade. There has never been a fatality on our site as a result of any sort of chemical exposure, including chlorine. Over the years, there have been minor worker exposures that result in first aids, often as a result of normal work duties, such as opening pipes and vessels that may potentially have chlorine in it. We have very stringent safety protocols and precautions to make sure that workers are not exposed. But, I won't say it hasn't happened on occasion. But we're talking first aids. Our standard treatment is to administer oxygen, and usually, the employee is released at that point to go back to work.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second question is, how many loaded rail cars would typically be on site at one time? Has staff compared the relative risk of one static tank versus multiple loaded rail cars? Did the QRA evaluate only on-site risk, or did it also include transportation risk along the rail corridor? So I just want to preface responses that the risk assessment is conducted by Baker Risk and peer reviewed by Risk Tech. So no staff analysis. This technical has been conducted as we use the professional reliant model in our review. So this question would be best addressed by the applicant and applicant consultant.
Okay. We are restricted by our covenant with the district that's in place now and has been in place for the past 20 years to a limit of 32 rail cars on site. That's what we have, and that's what we will have going forward. There was some information earlier that showed a much, much larger number, which is completely inaccurate. It's 32 cars is what we're allowed. And Alex, are you on the line still from Baker Risk?
Alex Ferguson is not a panelist at the moment. We can move Alex over if they're necessary for that specific response. Okay, we'll move Alex Ferguson over.
So could you repeat the second part of that question to make sure Alex has it clear?
Yeah, sure. As the staff compare the relative risk of one static tank versus multiple loaded rail cars, did the QRA evaluate only on-site risk, or did it also include transportation risk along the rail corridor?
Alex Ferguson, do you understand the question?
I do, yes. Thank you so much for the question. The scope of our work was looking at chemtrade operations within the property boundary. We did not look at rail car transport.
The next question is, what are the additional risks with regards to adding a hydrogen plant next door and increasing population, representing doubling the previous density that was not there when the last rezoning and risk assessment was done? So I'm referring this back to the Baker risk and then the applicant.
To Alex Ferguson, were those matters considered?
The population density isn't part of the MIAC guidelines as it's an individual risk value. And the QRA did not look at offsite impacts to chemtrade operations.
Now, I will state that we did have a review of the hydrogen, of the HTEC hydrogen QRA, and based upon their QRA information that was received and provided to this council as well, they only identified one potential scenario that would have impacted our property, and that was a complete tank levy. And that risk came with it certain recommendations for HTEC to mitigate, which was going to be a concrete blast wall. And in the QRA, they specified that that would eliminate the risk. So assuming HTEC followed through on the recommendations in the QRA, there should be no risk exposure to our property based on their QRA.
Thank you.
The next question is, are we recording the presenter's questions as they're part of the record, and will the questions be answered? So the response to this one is that questions are recorded as part of the record, but we will only be responding tonight to questions that are asked from the council.
What resources? You just don't.
I'm getting to it. Okay. The next question is, what resources are required to train and create exercises to emergency situation in the surrounding area? Who is responsible for the residents and business community in regards to how to shelter in place? And what is the evacuation plan in the worst case scenario? Whose responsibility and who will pay for this program? Where is the plan? As stated in the staff presentation, there has been an established community safety protocol that will be activated should there be a safety event. Emergency planning is a coordinated responsibility. Chemtrade maintains its on-site emergency response plan and funds its internal training and as exercises, and District Fire and Services and North Shore Emergency Management oversee broader public safety coordination and notification systems. Public shelter-in-place instructions would be issued through established alert systems, and response actions, including evacuation, if required, will be directed by incident command based on real-time conditions.
Mayor Little, could we have staff provide us with a calendar of exercises to date in the last 5 years?
You can write that in. You can write that in as a question,
okay.
Councillor, and we'll do our best to get that responded to. Yeah, Yan Zhang, if you can continue, please.
Thank you very much. Can we learn more about Baker and engineering and risk tax experience and record in risk assessment? Do they have experience in the assessment of risk of similar plants, chlorine in other locations? I am going to direct these questions to Baker Risk and the applicant.
Thank you very much.
Alex, are you still on? Okay.
I am, yes, thank you. We do risk assessments for a variety of industries across all of the chemical industries. And so that includes multiple manufacturers and producers of chlorine, yes.
The second part of that question is, what about the experience of risk tech? I do have Nasser Battery on the call as a panelist, and I'm wondering if I can call on Mr. Battery to mention your firm's experience in risk assessment.
Okay, I do believe we have Nasser Badri on there. I see you're unmuted in the system. Do you have a response to that question? I can't hear you, even though you're marked as unmuted in the system. Maybe double check your microphone and try again. I still can't hear Nasser Badri.
I do wanted to say that the Risk Tech is a very reputable firm based in Calgary, Alberta. And I'm happy to provide more experience from their CV in a moment. So I'll carry on with the questions at this point. If the rezoning, the next question is that if the rezoning is granted, what restrictions will Chemtrade be in terms of level of production of the chlorine? And will they be able to expand production and shipments? So the proposal is not to increase production capacity. And as stated, the legal instrument that will be registered on title and the permit itself, permit that issued will also ensure that there's no opportunity to expand production and shipment unless otherwise specifically applied for. The next question is that although rezoning would be enduring, what would happen if Port decide to not renew the lease with Chemtrade after December 31st, 2044? So as the Port representative responded that it is within the Port jurisdiction to decide whether they want to renew the lease beyond 2044. And staff's understanding is that without that Port access, the facility will not be able to operate.
That is correct.
The next question is I would like to consider how we could align the Port's lease agreement.
Sorry, we may not have had a microphone at the time. Can you restate your answer, please?
This is Alan from Chemtrade. That is absolutely correct. Without port access, we would not operate the plant or could not operate the plant.
Thank you.
The question is wondering how we could align with the Port lease agreement in terms of the zoning approval. That's my understanding of the question. So when zoning is granted by council, the property owner obtains the right to use the land in accordance with that zoning. If council were to subsequently amend the zoning to prohibit that use, it would become a legally non-conforming use and could continue within the limits established under the LGA, the Local Government Act. As a result, staff are not aware of any mechanism to directly align council's zoning authority with the Port's lease agreement. The next couple of questions are related. The question starts with that other municipalities such as Coquitlam have converted their water treatment facilities to using bleach instead of chlorine to reduce the risk to the community. The North Shore wastewater treatment plant will not be using chlorine or bleach and instead be using an ultraviolet process also to reduce risk. Why isn't Chemtrade using newer technologies that are safer than liquid chlorine? And I think a follow-up question is that what would be the difference between potable water disinfecting versus wastewater disinfecting? And then staff hopefully be able to address this question. So So there is a distinction between the municipal disinfection methods and an upstream chemical production. The UV treatment, like what was used at the North Shore wastewater treatment plant, is suitable for wastewater discharge, but does not provide a residual disinfectant for drinking waters. It's not suitable for drinking water system. And many municipalities that no longer use chlorine gas use sodium hypochlorite or bleach. However, bleach is manufactured using chlorine, so chlorine remains necessary upstream in the supply chain. So that's the staff's portion of the response, and I would like the applicant to provide their response to this question.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. This is Alan Robinson again with Chemtrade. So you just hit the nail on the head with all the discussion and things that were going on from some other folks here in the room. Sodium hypochlorite is chlorine plus caustic plus water. You don't get bleach, which is sodium hypochlorite, without chlorine. So as you've stated and we showed in bars there, most municipalities use bleach, right? There are very few municipalities left that still use chlorine. We've been very open about that. We've been very open that chlorine makes bleach. A couple key things, because I think there's several questions around, could Chemtrade make bleach? Why not do bleach? And a couple different areas there. I'll go on to say a few things. One, bleach does have limitations. What wasn't shared with you is that bleach breaks down as a function of time and temperature. So there's a reason why liquid chlorine is shipped around to many different proximities. There's local bleach manufacturers in those proximities so that they can receive liquid chlorine, manufacture bleach locally, and then ship it to their local municipalities as that are pretty close in terms of proximity. Because if it breaks down too much, it doesn't meet the spec. It doesn't do the disinfection that you'd require to get clean drinking water out of your tap.
I did just want to interject one clarification there. So the wastewater treatment process that we have on the North Shore doesn't include UV. The potable water system that we have includes UV. So we have a UV filtration plant up at the Seymour Water Filtration Facility. It's the final stage of disinfecting that it happens, and then some chlorine is added so that it has some disinfectant properties while it's traveling through our pipe system. But the wastewater treatment plant is a cell membrane technology and biofilter based, not UV based.
I really appreciate that response, Your Worship. I'm a land use planner. As you can see, I didn't quite answer that question appropriately. So,
if I could interrupt, sorry, I don't feel like the question has fully been answered, and I wondered if I could go back to it with a follow-up, which is, so why if bleach is safer overall, why doesn't Chemtrade either consider or use a process that involves converting chlorine to bleach?
So we are looking at a bleach operation on site. I won't go into too much detail on that, as we've got major competitors in the room here that have talked earlier, around those topics. So we are looking at, can we do bleach, but it would be a very limited operation. As I mentioned, it breaks down over time and temperature, so you can only ship it so far.
Would it meet your current clients' needs?
Not all of our current client needs.
Not the ones in the US, I take it.
Not the ones in Canada either.
And the other point worth noting, if we were to take all of our liquid chlorine that we produce today, convert it into bleach to ship out, we would go from shipping 1,000 rail cars a year of liquid chlorine to in the neighborhood of 70 to 100,000 trucks of sodium hypochlorite. Because when you convert it from liquid chlorine to bleach, you increase the volume several times, because you're now shipping a bulk liquid, which is a lot of water. So it would be a massive increase in shipping and truck traffic throughout North Vancouver.
Thank you. Okay, Kanzang.
Thank you. The next question is that the consultant from Baker Risk described the worst case scenario would be the full release on site of chlorine from a rail car. Would the event worst situation be, would an even worse situation be during a massive earthquake, that there was a full release of chlorine from a rail car, as well as leaks from other loaded rail cars that are waiting to be transported? So would the applicant be able to respond to that question?
I believe we have Alex Ferguson online from Baker. Do you have a response to that?
Yes, thank you very much. As we discussed previously, the there's the consequence component and the frequency and probability component. And yes, a multiple rail car release would potentially be a larger event, but it is comparatively infrequent and unlikely. And so due to the very remote possibility, it was not included as part of the study.
It's at the maximum volume. I don't know if there's any way, Mr. Perkins, to have you speak more directly into the microphone. It's quite muffled by the time it's getting to us.
I'm very sorry. Is this a little bit better?
Yes, it is actually. So if you could restate your response, that would be really appreciated.
Absolutely. Terribly sorry for the audio on my end. So the potential consequence of a multi-rail car release could have a larger footprint impact. But as we look in it in a risk perspective, you look at the likelihood and probability as well. And within the scope of a QRA, the likelihood of that massive of event leading to a multiple simultaneous release from those rail cars is so improbable that it was not included within the scope of the QRA.
Relevant? Is that what he needs?
That's the response we've received. Yan Zhang?
Thank you. What is the next question? Is what is the applicant's response to the argument that they could produce bleach instead of chlorine? Anything to add to that?
I think we've answered that question.
How many water treatment plants in Canada use chlorine gas? And in terms of, and then it's a related question, in terms of chlorine, liquid chlorine gas, and then hypochlorite. Metro uses the latter. Please confirm the difference.
Yeah, I think we went through sodium hypochlorite is bleach, which is manufactured from combining chlorine, caustic, and water. Metro Vancouver uses bleach. So our chlorine goes to a bleach plant, bleach is then sent to the municipality. What I mentioned earlier, just to restate, is most municipalities use bleach. You don't get bleach without chlorine.
The next question is that will Chemtrade be using the newer reinforced rail cars? And if so, how many and how many fully loaded cars would be on site at any given time?
Yeah, so I'll answer, like we stated 32 is mandated how many rail cars can be on site at any time, but all chlorine producers shipping rail cars will be required by the governments to have these new rail cars by the end of 2027. So January 1, 2028. We are already well underway in terms of conversion of half of our fleet already meets the new requirements.
Thank you. The next question is, what safety controls remain within the district authority once chlorine leaves the site? What sort of exercises has Nassim run for chlorine release? So the fire department has provided detailed response to this question earlier today. On the high level, we have a collaborative response alongside our partners at North Vancouver City Fire Department in the event of a fire or chlorine event on site. And I would like to share some of the documents that the fire department shared with us, and that is detailed a Chemtrade logistic and response workflow, as well as responsibility workflow and Chemtrade, the ERP. I think it's the ERP. If I may have that pull up online. So basically, Chemtrade maintains a detailed and comprehensive emergency response plan, the ERP. And the ERP covers multiple scenarios, including catastrophic chlorine release. The key components of this ERP include training and preparedness, regular review and practice of safety processes, annual tabletop exercises simulating emergency scenarios, full-scale facility-wide exercises to test and update ERP effectiveness. And then the next component is external notification procedures. Employee immediately call 911 upon detecting a significant spill. North Shore Emergency Management is notified to activate the alertable public alerting system. Public receives detailed instructions, including nature of the incidents, shelter-in-place steps, which close windows and doors, turn off air intakes, HVAC systems. And instructions also shared with first responders and posted on Chemtrade's social media. Direct phone call notifications sent to local First Nations, immediate neighbors, all levels of elected officials. The next component is the incident response itself. Chemtrade established an incident command center, activation of their CHLOR rep team, contractors, and consultants. Emergency modeling software used to predict release impacts and share real-time data with first responders. Collaboration with fire department and partners. Fire and rescue services and Chemtrade agree that resuming joint emergency response exercise is a priority planned for fall 2026. Site tours provided to the fire department members in 2024 and 2025 to familiarize teams with risks. Chemtrade and CN Rail committed to ongoing product-specific training, including liquid chlorine response. And the two documents, the flow chart and then the detailed response ERP are in the public hearing binder, and happy to share with Mayor and Council and the public. The next question is, can we ask for all presentations from members of the public? And I will let Clerk's Department to answer that.
Great, thank you. The slides will be available in the recording of the public hearing for viewing. However, we do not have the emailed file unless it was provided to input@dmv.org. If speakers want to submit their presentation material, we encourage them to either email input@dmv.org prior to the close of the public hearing, or if they have it in hard copy, to drop it in the black tray at the presenter's desk. However, if you have already submitted any written material, there's no need to submit it again, as we will have already accounted for it in the public hearing binder.
Okay, thank you.
Next question is, why is the port lease limited? And why do they want the removal of the facility from the port property? Is it to avoid liability? So based on the information provided by the port representative, the limitation appears to be relating to the port mandate and permitted land uses, which focus on trades and trade shipment activity rather than the actual industrial manufacturing and processing. Has potential significant increase in residential density of the ATR land on Dollarton being considered in the risk assessment by Risk Tech, Baker, or the district? Information about the proposed, this is the response information about the proposed future use of the surrounding lands within the district is publicly available in the district official community plan and part of the risk calculation. The next question is that, is there any direct compensation offered to the District of North Vancouver?
Sorry, Mayor Little, my question wasn't answered.
Sorry. Counselor, you can't keep interrupting it.
Well, I just appreciate if my question could be answered, and it wasn't.
It was answered. Has the potential significant increase in residential density of the ATR land on Dollarton be considered in the risk assessment? And the answer was that it was on-site risk assessment for that area. Is that not correct? Yeah. So there's obviously a very clear difference between the fire department's response areas and the MIAC guidelines risk areas. But the MIAC guidelines risks areas, which is what the assessment was based upon, are around the site. Is that correct, Mr. Milburn?
That's correct. And I could just add to that. The question was, did the district
do we consider risk? So we have for many years considered the risk. There's been a number of MIAC assessments over the years. And in fact, one of the MIAC assessments results is actually included within the Maplewood plan. And the applicant's revised MIAC assessment, if this project is approved, would then be used by staff for future land use decisions. So we have used past reports to make land use decisions, and we would continue to in the future if this project was approved.
Thank you, Mayor Little. The previous question wasn't answered either. What was the legal liability to the district in regards to a catastrophic release? The question wasn't complete, the one that was posted on the chat.
You're correct. I think that clause was missed. So do we have a response to that? What is the legal liability to the district in regards to a catastrophic release?
Your worship, in terms of liability and risk, those are typically items that are discussed in an in-camera meeting. I can say that there are certain both statutory risk reduction in the Local Government Act with respect to council's decisions around to approve or not approve a rezoning or issue or not issue a permit. Additionally, council has a core policy decision-making role and has mitigated liability attached to making core policy decisions. And finally, the staff are recommending that safe, harmless, and indemnity clauses be included in any conditions attached to the property through the covenant that's recommended if the project is approved. So between those mechanisms, we think council can take that under consideration. And further details, we would prefer to provide information on risk as a closed meeting recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question and response, please.
The next question is there any direct compensation offered to the District of North Vancouver other than normal property taxes for approval of this project? So other than paying the rezoning application review fee, staff are not aware of any other compensation to the district. The next question is that can DMV hire a consultant to do a robust independent review of Chemtrade's operations and safety? The risk tech report only reviewed the results of Chemtrade's safety report. Staff's response to that is that the standard approach recommended by staff is for the applicant's consultant to complete assessment and conduct a peer review as required. This is a best practice approach used by professionals to validate and verify professional reports. And the next question is that has the risk assessment considered security issues? So response is that the QRA primarily evaluates accidental release scenarios, including equipment failure, human error, and external events such as seismic activity using recognized risk assessment methodology. The national or international security threat are generally addressed through separate regulatory and security framework rather than through the land use QRA modeling. And that's our understanding. And I'm wondering if the applicant has any further, or your consultant have any further response in regards to that.
Good question for Alex. I think good question for Alex.
Yeah.
Certainly,
Alex Ferguson.
Pulling my mic close. Thank you. I think that summary covers it very well. The security piece is typically done in a separate exercise, also sometimes known as a security vulnerability analysis.
So the answer is that security vulnerability analysis has not specifically been done on this project. Thank you.
The next question is the production and shipping of liquid chlorine the only profitable way for Chemtrade to operate on an industrial plant on this land? Is there not a business case to operate a plant that does not present the same level of risk and produce alternatives? If the applicant is able to provide a response.
Yeah, what I mentioned is there are opportunities that we're reviewing for different technologies. I mentioned bleach. There's another opportunity that we're looking at as well that would continue to reduce the amount of liquid chlorine that is shipped. And those business cases are being evaluated. They are on hold as we speak, right? Because they won't they won't reduce 100% or won't consume 100% of the liquid chlorine that is produced. Right. So the only way to keep operating that facility is to have liquid chlorine options to keep moving liquid chlorine to the local communities. Bleach can be made to supply the local municipalities. To make, from a financial standpoint, I think the question was, is there a business case? And the answer is there are pieces that can be done, but not fully 100% converted.
Thank you.
The question is, has there been any assessment regarding our personnel capacity to handle varying degrees of accidents? Would you be able to provide a response to that?
So when we heard that question,
so I want to be clear about it. It's asking about our personnel.
Yeah, that's
in the District of North Vancouver's personnel. Ooh. So I believe we have fire department's response plan.
Yeah, the emergency response plan that Ms. Yan Zhang read into it identified a range of potential risks, including worst case scenarios. And so I believe that's covered in the response provided. And it has been also in writing provided council through the public hearing package and the public. Thank you.
Okay.
The next question is, how many rail cars are allowed on the site? I believe this question was answered, but can the applicant provide the response again, please?
Yeah, at any point in time, on average, we can have 32 rail cars of liquid chlorine by covenant. We do produce 2 other product lines, hydrochloric and caustic. So there's lots of chlorine. There's lots of rail cars of caustic and hydrochloric with zero mandate of what can be stored on site. The only mandate is on 32 rail cars of liquid chlorine.
Okay, I think I'm just providing a response on the fly because there are more questions coming.
We can return back to first-time speakers and then give staff an opportunity to prepare more responses. We have had about another 5 or 6 questions come in from council in the interim, but I think I'm inclined to return back to the public to see additional. First, I'm going to continue on with first-time speakers. I have a virtual participant, David Montgomery, who has raised his virtual hand. So we're going to move David over to the panel. If anybody else would like to add their comments to the meeting, just indicate by raising your hand. We have a speaker over here. You'll be next and you'll be after that. And then we'll return to virtual speakers as well. We'll check in. We also have a slide that we can put up on the screen. There it is. If we have virtual participants who would prefer to be on the phone, there is a phone number and connection route there for you that we can accommodate as well. So first, let's check in with David Montgomery. David, I see you're on the panel now. Can you hear me? You are marked in the system as muted, David.
Pardon me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Welcome. I can hear you clearly. You have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Great. Thanks. No, I just wanted to raise my hand to answer one of the questions there regarding Risk-Tech's experience. Sorry, we had a bit of mic issues on our end, so this won't take too long, but we just wanted to confirm that we've conducted several different QRAs globally with respect to chlorine plants, including
David Montgomery. Oh, yeah. Which organization are you representing?
Oh, pardon me. I'm David Montgomery. I'm a principal consultant with Risk-Tech.
Okay, great. Thank you for Risk-Tech. Great. Go ahead.
Yeah. Pardon me. Yeah. So I just wanted to answer the question that was asked to us previously originally to Nasser Badri, but he had mic issues. So I just wanted to reply that we have conducted several different QRAs globally. We have a ton of experience globally from 2004 and then within Canada starting in 2010. But we have done QRAs for several different facilities and including chlorine plants as well. We've done one recently with ERCO in the US and we're conducting one currently in Saskatoon. So we're able to provide more information if needed, but we just want to raise that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Next, I have joining us here in person. Come on up.
Hi, Joe.
Yes, please. Welcome. And when you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing. If you could start with your name for the record, that would be appreciated.
Hello, anybody hear me?
Yes.
My name is Henry Gent, Gent. I'm a resident of the District of North Vancouver since 1976. Okay, and now I've been living in the Windsor Park area and then the Maplewood. Now I'm living at Darlington and Depot area next to Gate Park. And I'm a professional engineer, retired with the BC Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists. I retired and then I resigned from the association about 3 years ago because I'm getting too old to participate. Anyway, I am not connected with Chemtrade. I am a speak as a resident of the District of North Vancouver. And like I said, since I come to live in North Vancouver, I participated in the election of all you peoples every time, okay? Anyway, I had been working as an engineer at the former chemical plant called Poker Chemicals, Canadian Occidental Chemicals, CX5 Chemical, Nexen Chemicals. I started in 1974. I retired in 2005. Okay, and what did I say? I had participated as an engineer in practically every project in a plant, whether it's a modernization, technology transfer, or maintenance or capital projects. I've done practically everything. So I know the plan, I know the process very well. And I have to say, what Chemtrade asked for, I think an excellent idea to allow them to clean up some of the stuff, remove some of the obsolete equipment and building, and also upgraded the system, make the system a lot safer and more efficient. And during my 30 plus years of employment with the chemical plant, I think we run very well. There's no major accidents or no major injuries because we had all these building monitors, alarms to take care of things before even the outside perimeter of the building of the plant. They even know that maybe the sound alarm, the whistles of thing, but nothing went beyond the boundary. Okay, so I'm very proud of it, being part of it. And I think I would recommend council to approve what Chemtrade want to do and make the building make the operation even safer. And that's all I have to say. Oh, by the way, after I retired in 2005, and I took a year off, and then the subsequent company called Connexus Chemical, and they needed somebody to help them to manage the shutdown because it's not like a refinery, pulp mill and everything. We have to shut down the place twice a year, maybe for a week or 10 days to get the thing opened up and do the overhaul, inspection and repair and make sure the system will run safely, efficiently for the next 6 months or 9 months. So at the time, not Chemtrade, but Connexus is in the process of technology transfer. They don't have anybody available to help them to do the planning, the shutdown. So they hired me back to be there, to plan the shutdown, inspecting the pressure vessel, the pumps and everything else. And because I happen to be the person that touched practically everything. So when they open up something, I know what to look for. I have to tell the contractor what to do, tell the consultant and supplier what to do. So I was there for about 8 years, but not continuously, maybe a couple months. So, and then I was there. Finally, when I get to about 70 years old, here, my family said, Dad, you don't go to work anymore. So I retire because what I know, they should know. What I don't know, they should also know. So that's why I said, Chemtrade want to do the improvement. Let's go, let them go ahead. That's all I have to say. Thank you
For your comments. Right. Gentleman on the side there.
My apologies. I don't normally wear a hat. I'm going through skin cancer treatment on my face. It makes me look a little bit better. Anyways, good evening.
You are welcome, and you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thanks. Gentlemen,
just for clarity, I need to start with your name for the record.
I'm Rob Inman, and you're familiar with my father, Derek Inman, who was the third Freeman of the District of North Vancouver. And I was born at North Vancouver Hospital and I still own the home on Crescent View Drive, the Panama Log House. But when I came home from coaching soccer at the high school tonight, my wife gave me the notice about the meeting and she said, I think you should go. And I'm certainly happy I came, though I'm very, very impressed with the expertise that you've had here speak tonight. I'm also wondering if I should sell my properties and close my business down because I have a number of properties and a business at the corner of Riverside Drive and Spicer. And I just want to make a note of some things people said. The railway crossing, of course, I see it every day and we see the chlorine tank containers come through by CN Rail. There's 6 crossings down in that area. 5, they see and blow their horn as they go through, and they do what they're supposed to do, blow 3 times coming up and through the intersection. On Riverside Drive, they finally, after many years, I was one of the ones who came and got the district to get CN to put the railway crossing lights in, and which they have. So it's okay. CN goes very slow through there. And any new construction going on down there, I always said that don't worry about if there's an earthquake. I'm sure everything's going to be up to earthquake standards. Don't worry about an earthquake. I'm more concerned about the dam, Seymour Dam coming down and flooding us. But I want to point out, there was a question asked by one of the members of council. I have so much respect for Mike Danks and Chris Byron. I know that, very, very well organized. Our District of North Vanc Fire Department is exceptional. But there has been 2 spills. And in 1993, I think it was, is that there was a chlorine leak from, I guess they were filling one of the tankers. Minor people all got moved, fire came down. But then a few months later, there was a second spill. And when we saw the people from those days, I think Hooker Chemical, running down the street towards us, I got 7 of my employees and got a hold of tenants in the buildings and got them to get up, everybody go up on top of the roof because just wasn't enough time getting cars to get out of there. Unfortunately, 2 of my employees came back and where the hell is everybody? They both got inhaled chlorine. They were 2 of the 5 that were taken to Lionsgate Hospital, where my wife works ICU and still works after 47 years. Those 2 never came back to work again. And one of them had not good breathing and lung problems. So the thing is that we did get a letter about 20 years ago from the chemical plant giving information what was stored there, what goes on, and what should do in case there was an emergency. But I heard that there was, the fire department, and I know Danks and Byron obviously have got things very well organized. But since I have a lot of tenants, one with 56 in the building next door to me, I think I'm going to go talk to everybody and the management. And I think it would be nice if we were maybe given some written information sent out, because there's a lot of new buildings going on, you know, with the where Stong's is, and you're putting up some more apartment buildings and stuff. I think it would be really helpful that the tenants and businesses in the area were updated about what to do, because in the past, there's supposed to be a siren that goes off in case of emergency. Usually, I think it was the third Thursday or Tuesday of the month, you would hear the bell go off. I haven't heard it in a long time. So I think, you know, more communication is, as long as the chemical plant is there, or if they continue to be there in the future, would be really helpful. Thank you. One last question. Do you still have the necklace that you wear for special council meetings?
Of course I do. And we wear it for regular meetings of council, and it has an insignia on the back that recognizes the contribution from the Inman family.
Yeah.
For that, I show it off all around town.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so would anybody else like to speak a first time? This includes virtual participants. Corey Koss joining us here in person. If you could come down.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council.
Welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Yes, my name is Corey Cost. I moved into the district in 1973. And I've been well educated at the University of Manitoba, where I got a PhD in nuclear physics, and then joined a TRIUMPH project at UBC for 36 years. So I have a lot of passions, but one of my passions is to pay back to the community the good quality of life it has given me. And so for the last almost 40 years, I've attended most council meetings, and this is one of the issues coming forward. This is just part of my collection on the chlorine plant, which I would like to donate to the hall, or have it all scanned nicely, and if at all possible, even return. But it's too much of a burden. I can't get this into anywhere else. So it's a saga since the time of the other studies that have been done. And I have them with me as well. But the key issues about the chlorine plant and its future plans is the plant has no serious chlorine releases since it started in 1957. I think that's noteworthy. However, times change. And if such a chlorine plant were ever proposed to be here today, it would be absolutely rejected at all levels of government to be here. Such a use would never be permitted today. So in my humble opinion, the future vision of Maplewood can never be fulfilled so long as this plant exists. The District of North Vancouver, taxes and fees collected by this facility should not be a factor to council in deciding this issue. It should not be a trade-off ever between money and safety. Safety, in my mind, has always been paramount. Now, as a measure of safety, perhaps I should state that the plant's liability insurance of $300 million in the 1990s, if it were renewed today, should be about $1 billion required contract. If there's no such insurance currently in place, then it speaks volumes about the insurance company, about the whole risk of the situation. Find that key number, you get some idea about how professionals in the insurance companies look at this risk. Now, the proposed bylaw 8778 does not have an expiry date for the production of chlorine that I could find, but I've heard some dates. But certainly to change the deal, as it were, to be a sort of irreversible, I think is not a good move if you should go in that direction. A global survey that I've done indicated no chlorine plant in the world lies this close to housing. The Baker Risk report that the latest 10 to the -6 counter does not lie within the boundary of the site. And that is one of the qualifications that other jurisdictions, mainly I think it's Melbourne, have brought to light. They're required to have the 10 to the -6, not 10 to the -4, inside the boundary of the property. Now continue for whatever time the council permits you to put in to council on this issue. So I'll leave this as a hopefully safe deposit. I'm not happy to see it go. In other ways, I'm quite happy to see it go.
Sounds like it. We will follow our policies on how to manage such a large submission. I'm sure a lot of it originates with public documents from the district, but we'll have a review of what needs to be scanned and shared out of it with the intent of full disclosure of the contents. I'm sure Lydia is thrilled that you got rid of that tonight. All right, would anybody else like to address this hearing for a first time? Okay, is staff ready to provide some responses to the additional questions that have been received?
Yes, we are.
If you could please read the questions into the record and provide the responses into the record as well, please.
Thank you. The first question is that first additional question is that can staff provide a log of exercises over the last 5 years based on emergency response and training for local business and residents, how often it occurs, who provides the training, and who pays for the cost of the training. I will ask the applicant to provide your response first, if I may. Thanks.
Blair Hetherington. The facility is mandated by the E2 Environmental Emergency Plan to run a full-scale exercise every 5 years. The plant has run one every 2 years for the last 6 years, I believe. That's a full-scale exercise where the whole plant is involved and outside parties are brought in. During COVID, that wasn't possible, but we're getting back to that. There's also tabletop exercises run involving multiple people from the plant and external parties, consultants. And those, they're only required to run one a year, and they've been running one a month for the last year and a half.
Thank you. I think there might have been a question missed. Is a blast wall being included? I think was before that.
Yes, there is one. Yeah. Sorry. Is a blast wall being included in the HTEC development? The development permit for HTEC was issued last spring. However, we have not issued a building permit. We have not received a building permit submission yet. So whether a specific blast wall is included would depend on the final engineering design and the regulatory requirement at the building permit stage. On the recommendation of the final QRA for that project, staff will ensure that the appropriate safety measures are secured through the technical review process, which may include the installation of the blast wall. So we can confirm that with council once we know the further detail. I actually missed another question before, which was asking how many rail cars are on site.
That was where we left off.
That's where we left off, wasn't it? And then it goes into this next question, which is on GeoWeb aerial photos, it shows hundreds of rail cars on Chemtrade side. Can they advise, given you mentioned the 32 numbers, so these two questions go hand in hand.
I think that was asked and answered when the response was chloralkali, or sorry, caustic soda and other precursors, but
I can provide a lot more detail if you want real numbers, but at the end of the day, we can store up to about 260 rail cars on site at any point in time. Many of those are empty. Some of those are full with HCl. Some may be full with caustic soda, but we can only maintain 32 rail cars full of chlorine at any given time. And that's mandated by the covenants here with the district.
Thank you.
We got a full breakdown at any given time on average, what's empty, what's not, if you would like that level of detail, but you'll always see hundreds of rail cars on our site. It's a just-in-time operation.
Thank you.
Chemtrade, the next question is the Chemtrade chlorine goes to a bleach plant. Where are those bleach plants?
It's a Alan Robinson at Chemtrade here. It's a difficult question to answer. Like the customers are everywhere. Like I said, there are bleach plants in many proximities to local municipalities. And so bleach plants are placed all over Canada as well as all over the US. So given specific cities, places like that, we could certainly submit a list if you wanted to, but that's telling all my competitors where my customers are also located. And we have two competitors sitting here in the room. So I won't go into those details.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is, what year was Chemtrade Baker Risk Assessment Report completed? The qualitative risk assessment, the QRA prepared by Baker Risk for this application was complete in September 2025. And then the independent peer review by RiskTech was also completed in December 2025. And then the final comments and then revision completed in February 2026, this year, this month. The next question is, the rezoning is in perpetuity, but the water access is only until 2044. What happens then? So as stated earlier, if the port access or tenure were not to be extended beyond that date, then the applicant's ability to continue its operation would be uncertain.
I think they were more definitive than that they would not be able to operate without it.
That's correct. Yeah, would be not viable. The next question is that, is there still a siren or alarm at the site, or do they rely on rapid notice or alertable for alerting the neighbors? And please go ahead and provide a response.
knees are seizing up. Yes, no, there's still alarm on the site. It is tested every Tuesday. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. What insurance protections are in place for on-site and off-site risk?
I'm sorry, could you restate the question, Jan?
What insurance protections are in place for on-site as well as off-site risk?
I'm gonna look at Dale. I don't know if Dale actually knows that answer.
Insurance protection?
Yeah. I don't know that we have anybody here to answer that question.
We have general, no, we don't have any insurance experts here. I mean, we have corporate insurance for the site, but we would have to kind of get some of those details from our corporate insurance team. I just don't have the details.
Okay. May I ask, how long would it take to get that kind of information?
24 hours.
Okay. So we can make sure that that's available through this process. Thank you.
I believe this is the last question, which is to confirm the training and education for the community and surrounding businesses and homes, and how is the surrounding community advised as to what to do in the event. I think we have provided some of the information before, which is that there is ongoing community education and coordination. People mentioned CAP, the Community Advisory Panel. And we have also talked about that there is instruction in terms of a shelter-in-place procedure, and there are development covenants registered on title for those developments by Stone's, that development. So people, future buyers, aware of the procedure in place. And so it's an ongoing effort. And since we are going to bring back additional information with regards to the insurance question, we're happy to bring back additional clarification questions prior to second and third reading of the bylaw.
Training provisions. Okay. All right. I'm making my clerk very nervous. We have a policy that in order to extend beyond 10:30, I need a majority vote of council. So I'll ask for an extension of the meeting beyond 10:30. I'll move it. If there's a seconder, second by Councillor Back, prepared to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Noted with Councillors Ma and Hanson opposed. To be clear, our policy is that we can't go beyond 11 o'clock without unanimous consent. So I'm going to ask the question here just to get a sense of where we're at. How many people remaining in the room would like to speak a first or second time? Okay, so we're going to go beyond 11 o'clock, and I got to tell you, it would be historic if we actually approved an extension beyond 11 o'clock. And so I think it's fair to say we can count on there being a second night tomorrow night. And so we'll continue on tonight, but you can expect that we will return tomorrow night to continue the public hearing at this point. But I'm going to carry on with the meet. Yes, Councillor Mary, process question?
Yeah, given that there won't be support after 11 o'clock to continue this hearing, does it not make more sense just to adjourn it now and to carry on? It's been a long night, and if we're going to come back tomorrow.
We're still within the scheduled time, so we're going to continue until we can. But I hear your point. It'll only be a handful more speakers. We wouldn't have enough time to cover everybody in the room, but we may as well get the questions and comments and things underway. Well, it just passed extension beyond 10:30 with your support. So we're going to carry on at this time. Okay, so would anybody else like to address the hearing for a first time? Okay, having exhausted the first time speakers, I'm going to look to second time speakers. And I did have a couple of people put their name forward for second time. Michael Graveson, you were the first one to say you wanted to speak a second time, followed by Peter Teven and Corey Cost. So Michael Graveson, welcome. Again, you have 5 more minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you. I actually was in a municipal council in a small town in Quebec for 4 years, and I hated people like me. Speaking one time is enough, but two.
You are welcome.
Okay. So first of all, I want to talk about the storage issue. The question came up quite a bit about the amount of rail cars on site. And I just want to clarify based on the Chemtrade website. Yes, there are at any given time an average of 32 full cars. That's 80 to 82 metric tons per car. But there are also 159, they call them empty cars, but they're not empty. They're never empty. There's an average of 2 to 3 tons per car. And according to emergency response, they treat them as if it was a full car because they're still under pressure. That's where I came up with the 3,000 tons on site at any given time. And I would strongly suggest that the applicant remove the part of their application that says that they're going to reduce the on-site storage from 94 tons to 4 tons. Comment about hydrogen, and I hesitate to say this because I'm very pro-hydrogen, but I just want to say that the reason why Chemtrade is the largest chlor-alkali producer in Canada is because the largest one before them blew up, and it was a hydrogen leak. Now, I'm not advocating that they close. I never have. I'm just saying that that is a real possibility. And the worst part right now is that they have loaded chlorine rail cars really close by. If there weren't loaded chlorine rail cars, that risk, even if there wasn't an explosion, wouldn't be so bad. My next point is on bleach. I'm very happy that the applicant has acknowledged that the main disinfectant is not chlorine. It is bleach. And again, I would hope that they would correct their publications to not say that chlorine is the main disinfectant. Also, on the comment that bleach degrades, it does degrade, but currently there are 2 producers in your backyard, Coquitlam and in Langley. That's what, 30 minutes away? I don't live here, but I think it's around 30 minutes away. And from there, they ship the bleach to all the customers. What's the difference if you move the bleach plant to North Vancouver and you get more jobs, et cetera? So it probably degrades, but they're already doing it. And the logistics, they're already there. They're moving it in trucks. It seems, and this is my last point, it seems that people think that we were advocating for Chemtrade to close. That's not the case. I think Chemtrade's a great company. I know a lot of people that work at Chemtrade. I wish I was treated as well as they treat their people. It's a great company. We're not saying stop making chlorine. You can make more chlorine. Just don't liquefy it and don't put it into a rail car. You can still treat the water. You can have your cake and eat it too. Thank you very much.
For your comments, Michael Graveson. Second time speaker, Peter Teven, joining us here in person.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just before I begin, just a suggestion on procedure tonight. You have 25 minutes before the 11 o'clock hour, and clearly there are people here who have traveled from afar. And so I can delay, I can come back a second night, but I would like to give priority to those people because there's a chance they can speak and travel home.
At this point, I only have 2 people after you who have raised their hands, a third now. So okay, we can carry on.
Yeah, one of them is the lady from Ohio who traveled. Can she speak before me?
I hadn't seen her hand, but there you go. There it is. But I have to do it in the order. So you want to come back for a second time speaking later?
I'm fine with deferring to people who have traveled.
That works. Yes. Okay. Second time speaker, Corey Cost. Are you declining as well? Okay. Thank you. I have virtual participant Rick Hind. Rick Hind, can you, we have to move Rick over as a panelist. Okay, I see you've connected to the panel. Welcome. You have 5 additional minutes to address the hearing.
Okay, I just wanted to add a couple of things. One is that if there wasn't a security assessment in terms of the risk assessment, I would think that a vulnerability assessment and not just for physical attack, but cyber and et cetera, should be a minimum given today's cyber attack frequency, and also the advent of the AI becoming a major threat or maybe a resource. And lastly, the railroads complained in 2006 that they couldn't get liability insurance for TIH rail cars. So I think when you're looking at an assessment of a worst case scenario, and as I referenced the Homeland Security before, that the worst case of what EPA in the United States would do, or perhaps what they're using in their model and risk assessment, I don't know, is going to be much more if it's an intentional attack. World Trade Center is a good example. They hit both buildings. Military style is to be redundant. And so that needs to be taken into account instead of looking at things from a 20th century perspective with just old-fashioned accents. And of course, they're probably more likely, but I think in this case, we're dealing with such a large potential, although rare, potential for a lot of fatalities, then I think that should all be done. And lastly, if railroads were not taking into account in terms of their assessment of risk or hazard, I mean, that's the major part of it. They're sending the hazard out into the world where, as some have said, the current railroad isn't that reliable, but railroads themselves just have a lot of issues and it's unpredictable. And I don't think one car in a railroad, if you look at some of the recent or last 20 years of accidents, there's a lot of multi-car spillovers that could easily be more than one car. So just adding that to what I didn't get to before. But thanks for letting me be here, and I have a lot of respect for your process there. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for your comments, Rick Hind. The next speaker I have is second time Jess Connard. Welcome. You have an additional 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you. And I apologize. It's 1:30 in the morning in my brain. So just a couple of things that I wanted to respond to and enforce. There were 2 benzene residue cars that derailed in my community, and they said that the cars were mostly empty, but we found out that that was not true. And what I did find in my research is that a residue car is the name for any car that is not completely full. And in consultation with many people at the rail unions, legislative folks in the transportation department, meaning even if just 1 teaspoon less than full is the case, then it is considered a residue car. So I think that's really relevant information. In response to the emergency plan, as a mother who has been in a chemical disaster, I did have to shelter in place for 4 days. And this is what I think you should know. Shelter in place is not cozy. It's very uncomfortable. Your ventilation has to be completely shut off. Your heat, your air conditioning. You have to close the doors and the windows, and you cannot go outside. So consider your pets and how that would work. Disabled, elderly, or chronically ill, people who rely on meals to be delivered, or caregivers, dialysis patients, any water and food delivery would be completely cut off. Sheltering in place doesn't work. We still had all of the issues, all of the health issues still happened to my family as a result of the derailment in my community. Thank you for allowing me this additional time.
Thank you very much. I think there was another hand that I saw over here. Yes, Alex, I think. Is that right? Oh, I've got that right. Oh. Oh, I missed that. Colin Armstrong. There we go. Thank you.
I'm going to go back. In this presentation, there were some things I didn't get to the first time, and some other things we've discussed since. And it doesn't like me again. Let's see. Doesn't show up.
Not popping up.
No, it's not recognizing it. This happened the first time too.
Is there another USB port on that computer or just the one? Perhaps we can have a staff computer added as a. Yeah, just go. Hey, pop it in.
Try this one. I don't understand. That one works. Maybe it would have been. This was. Colin Armstrong again, speaking for a second time here. Let's skip forward to first here. There was a question about whether Baker risks analysis assessed a worst case scenario. I just want you all to understand there's a lot of talk about risk, a lot of talk about consequence. This plot here does not illustrate a worst case scenario. They said they evaluated a full chlorine rail car release. That's correct. But this plot does not illustrate that. This does not illustrate the hazard zone from a chlorine rail car release. This illustrates the risk considering what they called comparatively likely scenarios. That was the terminology that Mr. Ferguson used when he mentioned what the scenarios that were evaluated are. These are comparatively likely scenarios considered here, not the consequence of a rail car release. This illustrates the potential consequence zone of a single rail car rupture anywhere along the rail route from the chemtrade facility to, in this case, the Brentag bleach production facility in Langley. Coming back here, another note, we understand clearly the Baker risk gentleman confirmed it. Their analysis did not assess risk beyond chemtrade's fence line and someone's spoken to it separately, the risk of the hydrogen facility next to the railcar storage area. I have not had a chance to review the hydrogen QRA. What I've heard that installing a blast wall adjacent to the tank would fully mitigate the potential risk. Sounds very suspect to me from a technical perspective. I've done hydrogen risk assessment of many hydrogen facilities. I am considered to be an expert in hydrogen risk assessment globally. I'm part of the Center for Hydrogen Safety. That does not add up to me. I don't know who conducted that study. I haven't seen it, but I have many questions just from what I've heard. This illustrates the risk leaving the chemtrade facility. The amendment includes shipping of liquefied chlorine. Every dot here shows a daycare or a school in a risk zone that is considered by MIAC to be intolerable. That's clear. There's also nursing facilities and hospitals within this intolerable risk zone as well. This is the same risk criteria that Chemtrade's using to say that their on-site production is acceptable. It clearly shows that allowing that chlorine to leave the facility once it's produced is unacceptable. So how do we produce the chlorine on site and then allow it to leave the site and ship it? If the risk criteria tells us clearly that the shipping is what's unacceptable. Again, I'm not disagreeing with their on-site risk analysis. I'm not calling that into question here. They didn't assess these risks. The results are clear. The consequences and risks of chlorine being stored in rail cars and transported from the Chemtrade site are catastrophic and intolerable based on the criteria. Intolerable, not tolerable as they're shown in the Baker risk report to be. The risks to the community are intolerable in this case. It's just a fact. Risk mitigation has to be implemented, and the proposed mitigation measures which stop at the containment building are inadequate. When we talk about the hierarchy of controls, which is important in risk analysis, even the gentleman from Baker mentioned inherent risk. Inherent risk is present when we have a dangerous substance. That's why the first things that we consider are elimination and substitution. Many people have come before me here and said, the industry has moved. They have substituted chlorine gas for bleach, and eliminating the hazard is the most effective measure. What Chemtrade's proposed is engineering controls, a containment building that relies on ventilation, and administrative controls, their on-site safety systems to manage these risks. Those are not the most effective controls, and these need to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to address the matter for a first or second time? Mr. Stephen. Welcome. You have 5 additional minutes to.
Thank you. Should I restate my name for the record?
I think we got it.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
thank you.
I'll go back to the presentation I was working on. We had some information come out already tonight about this, but this was the question I had prepared in advance was, what about earthquakes? I think, and I'll state my question very clearly. Was seismic activity included in any of the risk assessments already done? This is from Natural Resources Canada. You'll see the deep red color is high risk for seismic events, and drew the aerial directly pointing at the Lower Mainland. Was that included in the risk assessment? Somewhat rhetorical question that would relate to this would be, I wonder how confident in their safety protocols the operators of the Fukushima nuclear plant were before the seismic event. Because we're talking about that kind of risk. I was reminded as I was studying this of these words. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions, and the simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. These words were first recorded in the 10th century BC in Proverbs 22:3. And we're still facing the same evaluation today in this century. Do we wisely foresee danger and take precautions, or do we blindly go ahead? So my question is, just to summarize the questions so far, what would be the ramifications of a rail car accident anywhere inside the DNV, but outside the loading facility? What are the laws regarding what council may and may not consider in an application such as this? And I think the expert from the risk assessment company just pointed out that the bylaw amendment specifically says transportation. And therefore, as an elector, I would say to my elected officials, I expect that you consider that risk. How many people have been injured or deceased in chlorine accidents in North America in the last 50 years? I wonder. And how many people have been injured or deceased in sodium hypochlorite accidents in North America in the last 50 years? Those are questions I would like to know the answers to. This is my second concern. The first one was rail safety. Why are we focusing on chlorine when the Seymour water filtration plant uses bleach? Now, I went onto this website, the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, and it had, as soon as you type in the word chlorine on their site, you see all these hazardous material symbols. And this is their text, not mine. The signal word is danger. The hazard statements are may cause or intensify a fire, oxidizer, corrosive to the respiratory tract, fatal if inhaled, causes severe skin burns and eye damage. Here's the same website for bleach. No symbols. Talks about household bleach. It is not listed as a hazardous material. Now, this is a very interesting thing to me. This is, you saw this in another presentation. I had found this myself. And here's the old process. This is from the Metro Vancouver's Seymour Capilano Filtration Plant brochure, produced in 2016. And it's got the whole process here of water filtration. And I blew it up on the right side so you could read it. It's a very interesting thing to me that Metro is putting this out that says sodium hypochlorite, which is bleach. And then it says chlorine. Why? Does Metro not understand the difference? Or are they trying to press an agenda? I don't know the answer to that. And I put it to you, Council. I've got 41 seconds here. I still have more material I'd like to present, but you know what this feels like to me is just another case of Metro and the province sticking us with the costs and the risks and giving the benefits to other people. I don't know how tired you are of it, but after I got my utility bill last year, I was already tired of it. And, you know, we've been misinformed and disinformed by Metro. This example I just showed you is disinformation. I don't, there's chemical experts here in the room. Sodium hypochlorite is not chlorine. Cl is chlorine. And why are we being misinformed? I'd like to return later if I might. And I'm okay if that's tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, our standard practice for a third time speaker, so long as you haven't repeated yourself, I'll grant a third time speaking. You haven't repeated yourself, so that.
And I will not.
Thank you very much. You know, I'm minding the time. Dr. Cost, if you'd like to speak, we'll, I may have to cut you off if we end up at the 11 o'clock hour, but come on down. My apologies if I do.
30-minute presentations. You might well about 10 minutes.
Okay. Some of those were legendary. There you go.
Yes, those were the times. So carry on. I left off with the global survey indicating no chlorine plants in the world lies this close to housing. With the next one, the Baker Risk report that the latest, the 10 to minus 6 contour does not lie within the site boundary. I'll submit another document, which I submitted on the same subject matter on November 22nd, 2017, where it says for a chlorine plant in Melbourne, the criteria set by the state government is that the 10 to the minus 6 individual fatality risk counter must not lie outside the site boundary itself. So you're talking about putting the 10⁻⁴ bound, inside the boundary. I ask, in accordance with what others are doing, that the 10⁻⁶ level threat, which is really low, lie inside their boundary, and then everything outside of it is permitted to be the normal uses. Okay, that's just, and speaking about, so I'll submit that right now. This is what Ernie Christ passed to me for probably reasons that I'd like to pass it to the district, so that somebody has a copy of the famous Beak report, which has many lots of useful graphics in it. It's still a useful study to have, but I really would like to eventually donate that, as was the updated Boulevard 1997 report by CXY Chemicals. Again, all these names come up differently. So let's just finish off this important one. I think I mentioned the no results for the worst case situation, say during an extreme earthquake, was ever studied. And sheltering in place, as people mentioned quite often, doesn't work very well when all your windows are shattered through an earthquake. And that's the most likely scenario. You have an earthquake which damages either the hydrogen or the chlorine plant or both together, which sets in motion. People go back to their homes and sit in a place which have no windows, in which case the blast radius certainly takes away all the windows in the lower lane. And that's the result. Liquid chlorine only now plays a small part in making our water safe, which uses, as others have mentioned, ultraviolet light as the primary disinfectant, and bleach, possibly misread, or maybe a very small amount of chlorine goes into the distribution network.
Dr. Cost, unfortunately, I'm going to have to interrupt you.
Okay.
We turn into a pumpkin in less than a minute. And so I do need to get something on the record. And so I'm happy to continue your time at a third time if you'd like to speak.
Or whichever comes up.
We'll add a minute to that time, no problem.
Okay.
At this time, Council, I do need to, I guess formally I need to ask, would Council like to extend the meeting beyond 11 o'clock? I don't see anyone moving that, so we're going to move past that. So then the next question is, I'm going to make a motion that the February 24th, 2026 public hearing regarding bylaw 8778 is adjourned, and will reconvene on February 25th, 2026 at 7 o'clock at District of North Vancouver Municipal Hall. Is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor Forbes. Call the question on the matter. All in favor? Contrary minded, motion is carried. So ladies and gentlemen, the item is adjourned, which doesn't mean that it's closed. You can still continue to talk about it, ask questions about it, talk to the council members about it. We haven't hit that point where it's full closure yet. But again, the best opportunity to provide your feedback will continue tomorrow night, starting at 7 o'clock. And so you are all welcome back to return or be virtual participants. Everybody, have a great night.